Chapter 6:16. Zhang Yan came out of the danding courtyard and returned to the clear darkness heavenly lake. After sitting down in the hall, he started to think about going to Dongshan continent. Before this, he intended to go to Shaoqing's sect to ask for a sword technique, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was inappropriate. Firstly, Shaoqing was in the extreme west of Donghua, and his whereabouts should not be known by too many people, so it was inconvenient to go there. Secondly, after seeing Sun Huaying's flying sword technique, he didn't think that he could beat her in this aspect, so the time was not right yet. He could only look for another opportunity in the future. However, he was entrusted by the sect master to go to Dongshan continent, not only to take over Shenbai Shuang's residence, but also to expand it. There were many things to do, and it was not enough for him to do it alone. He needed to bring a few direct disciples with him to help. Lu Yenny was the eldest disciple, so she had to guard the residence on his behalf and couldn't leave easily. Tian Kun was dull and focused on cultivation, so he didn't like it. On the other hand, the Wang sisters hadn't reached the core transformation realm yet, so they couldn't learn the divine arts of the sect, so it was a good time to bring them along. Thinking of this, he said, "Zhang Jing, go get Kai Wei and Kading." The mirror spirit left, and after a while, the Wang sisters came to the hall and knelt down together, saying, "Disciple greets teacher." Zhang Yan raised his hand and gestured for the two to stand up, saying, "I called you here today because I'm going to travel again. You two can come with me." Hearing that they were going to Dongshan continent, the two sisters had different reactions. Wang Kading's eyes shone with joy, while Wang Caiwei's expression was only slightly surprised, and then she calmed down. Zhang Yan smiled. With a flick of his finger, a light flew into Wang Caiwei's hand, and he said, "This is the ship of Dragon Country, it's a means of transportation for the three of us. Kai Wei, keep it well. Tomorrow, the two of you will leave the residence. Remember, don't fly, you have to go to the East Sea by land, and wait there. After I'm done, I'll come find you. I'll come find you." Dongshan continent was extremely far from Donghua continent, and they needed to cross the ocean. It would be easier if they used the astral wind to travel, but he didn't want too many people to notice him. He weighed the pros and cons. He decided that it would be better to travel by sea. Wang Caiwei was beaming with joy. He said, "I will obey master's orders." Zhang Yan didn't say anything else. He waved his hand, and the Wang sisters bowed to him again. Then, he retreated. Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said to the mirror spirit, "Go and invite Mr. Zhang and Mr. Lu." Zhang Boyan and Lu Mainyang had escorted Wei Zihong back to the mansion a few days ago and were currently cultivating in the cave. Hearing that Zhang Yan was looking for them, they immediately rushed to the main hall to meet them. After the three of them greeted each other, Zhang Yan first said to Zhang Boyan, "Mr. Zhang, I need to go to Dongshan continent for some reason. I'll leave in a while. I wonder if Mr. Zhang will stay or go with me." Zhang Boyan laughed and said, "I'm already a person without roots in Donghua. I've often heard that Dongshan continent is full of spiritual resources and is several times bigger than Donghua, but I've never had the chance to see it. I'm willing to go with you, Chief." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "That's good." He turned his head again and said to Lu Mainyang gently, "If Mr. Lu sees Elder Yan, please pass on my message. I will remember all the help I've given you previously, and I will repay you in the future." Lu Mainyang smiled softly and said, "You're too kind, Chief. I was fortunate to be taken care of by you, and lived in a cave paradise to achieve what I have today. Speaking of which, it's me and my wife who owe you, Chief." Zhang Yan sighed. He would be gone for at least 200 years, and Lu Mainyang was already more than 700 years old. After this farewell, he was afraid that they would never meet again, so he stood up and bowed solemnly. He said, "Take care, Mr. Lu." Lu Mainyang also knew that she had no hope of achieving Tao, so she understood the meaning behind his words. She quickly returned the bow and said seriously, "Chief, please be careful on your journey." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Then we'll part ways here." He pointed with his finger, and the array door was immediately opened. He leaped up and instantly arrived at the peak of Zhaoyu Mountain. It was nighttime, and he saw a river of stars crossing the sky. He instantly felt his chest relax. He looked at the reflection of the stars in the heavenly lake, and said, "Mr. Luo, I think you already know about my matter. Are you willing to come with me?" After a while, a splash was heard, and Dragon Carp Luo Ren popped her head out of the water. She shouted, "This pool is too small, master must bring me along." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Then follow me." Dragon Carp Luo Ren shook her body and turned into the size of a tadpole. Then, she turned into a black line and flew up from the water, entering his sleeve. Zhang Yan called out to Zhang Boyan, who had just come out of the formation door, then he circulated his Fa Li and shouted before charging into the clouds with his head raised. After that, he suddenly transformed into a ray of light and flew towards the south. When Zhang Boyan saw this, he also used his escape technique and followed closely. The two of them traveled for less than half a day, and in their field of vision, a continuous mountain range appeared. The ravines intersected, and the cliffs intersected. It looked extremely majestic. Zhang Boyan was shocked, and thought, if we go any further, we'll reach the mountain gate of Guangyuan sect, where the Wind Stream Mountain is located. That's right, the manor master should be here to see Shenin Feng. He thought for a while, and then caught up. He cupped his hands and said, "I'm a cultivator of Netherworld Spring sect, and I have a grudge with Guangyuan sect. It's not convenient for me to go." Before enlightened Shinchong of Guangyuan sect ascended, he could be said to be undefeated in the 9 continents. At that time, he killed many disciples and elders of Netherworld Spring sect, and because of that, a huge grudge was formed between the two sections. Although he was now a right-hand man of Zhang Yan's residence, he still felt that it was inappropriate to enter the enemy's mountain gate. Zhang Yan thought for a while, and understood his concerns, and agreed, "All right, then Zhang, please go ahead first. I'll catch up later." Zhang Boyan immediately agreed, and with a dash, he turned into a yellow smoke and flew away, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Zhang Yan watched him leave, and then slowly pressed down on the cloud. He saw the fog in front of him, and knew that if he went any further, he would reach the mountain guarding formation. He took out a flying letter from his sleeve, and threw it into the air. It turned into a white light and flew into the mountain gate. In the next moment, a cloud of smoke flew out of the mountain gate, and arrived in front of them in an instant. A handsome young cultivator dressed in white came out, and when he arrived in front of Zhang Yan, he bowed and said respectfully, "Are you enlightened, Zhang? The elder ordered me to come out and welcome you." Zhang Yan nodded, and said, "There's a hidden path in front of you." Elder Shen didn't personally come out to welcome him, not because he treated him poorly, but because the flying letter told him that his whereabouts shouldn't be revealed, and that there was no need to make a big fuss. The young cultivator turned around, and took out a talisman. He waved it in front of the mountain gate, and a golden light flew out from inside, and stopped in front of the two of them. He bowed again, and said, "Enlightened Zhang, please." Zhang Yan stepped on the golden light, and the young cultivator waved the talisman again. The golden light retracted, and in an instant, they passed through the mountain gate's formation. He looked around, and directly in front of him was a mountain path that led straight into the clouds, and he could vaguely see flying cranes dancing around it. On the mountain ridge, there were golden palaces, jade pavilions, and jade platforms. Hundreds of jade rivers were hanging down from the walls, and falling from thousands of feet in the sky. The sound was like thunder, and it was deafening, and the aura was extremely majestic. He couldn't help but nod to himself. Guangyuan sect was indeed a great Xianmen sect in the past. Such a mountain gate was not something a small sect could compare to. At this moment, another disciple flew over from afar, and said, "Shen Yong, the elder is waiting in the pavilion halfway up the mountain, quickly bring the esteemed guest there." The young cultivator from before replied, "Understood." He waved the talisman again, and Zhang Yan suddenly felt the scenery in front of him change. He arrived at a place where green bamboos were swaying, birds were singing, and in front of a cliff, it was spring. In the midst of the greenery, there was a jade white tree that was 5 feet tall, and its branches and leaves were wide open, shaped like a big crown, and looked like it was covered with frost and snow. Under the tree, there was an exquisite pavilion with a stone table and stone chairs. Elder Shen was standing in front of the pavilion with 2 attendants, and when he saw his arrival, he cupped his hands and said, "Enlightened Zhang, I apologize for not going out to meet you, please forgive me." Zhang Yan's body swayed, and he floated down. After he stood firmly on his feet, he smiled and returned the greeting, "Elder Shen is too polite." The 2 of them chatted for a while more, and then walked into the pavilion, and as the guest and the host sat down, Elder Shen ordered the attendants to bring over fine wine, fruits, and vegetables, and then they started toasting. After 3 rounds of wine, Zhang Yan put down the jade cup in his hand, and asked, "Elder Shen, is it convenient to talk here?" Elder Shen stopped smiling, and he dismissed the attendants, saying, "This is my place of cultivation, and other than a few of my close disciples, no one comes in or out of here, so fellow Taoist can rest assured." Zhang Yan nodded slightly, took out the earthly golden shaft talisman from his sleeve, and placed it on the stone table, saying, "On my way back to the sect, it was fellow Taoist Shen's talisman that helped me escape a disaster, and now it's returned to its rightful owner." Elder Shen sighed, and said, "I've also heard about this. Fellow Taoist was able to escape from those few people, who in the same generation in the world can compare to you?" Zhang Yan shook his head with a smile, and said, "So what? If I don't enter the grotto heaven, I'm still a pawn in the end." He took out another jade bottle, handed it to Elder Shen, and said, "I still have important matters to attend to, and it's not convenient for me to stay here for long. There's a portion of Jun Yang's spiritual essence in this bottle, fellow Taoist, please keep it well." Although Elder Shen had an agreement with Zhang Yan before, when this spiritual essence was really placed in front of him, he couldn't help but breathe quickly, and he felt a burst of excitement. He slightly calmed himself down, took the jade bottle, and said solemnly, "If it's as short as 10 years, if it's as long as 30 years, I'll definitely have an explanation." Zhang Yan stood up, and said, "Then let's set the deadline for 30 years, and at that time, I'll send a disciple over." He cupped his hands again, and said, "Farewell." Elder Shen nodded, and he also stood up, and returned the greeting. Then, he said to the young cultivator, "Shen Yong, send Jinren Zhang out of the mountain." Zhang Yan's body swayed, and he floated up, stepping on a ray of light. In just a moment, the scenery in front of him suddenly changed, and he was already outside the mountain gate. He stood in midair, and after thinking for a while, he took out a beautiful piece of jade, and said to a thin figure, "Fellow Taoist Su, the calamity of Donghua continent has already begun, and I want to send you to Dongshan continent for reincarnation. This way, you can protect fellow Taoist, and you can also avoid the calamity. What do you think?" Taoist Su was originally a disciple of Chongyue True Temple, and if he reincarnated, he would be taken by the disciples and elders of his own sect to enter Tao in the future. But how could this compare to becoming a disciple of Zhang Yan, so he didn't think too much about it. He cupped his hands, and said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Zhang Yan put away the beautiful jade, and with a long roar, he leaped up into the sky like a rainbow, looking toward the east. Chapter 6:17. The sea and sky were boundless, and the blue sky was clear as if it had been washed. However, there was a layer of dark clouds hanging at the end of the horizon, and it was like a thick black belt that was boundless in both directions. If one looked closely, one would be able to see countless bolts of lightning flickering and leaping about like silver snakes, and the sound of it spread out far and wide, and it could even be faintly heard from 5,000 kilometers away. At this time, there was a sudden loud sound, and in the thunderclouds, a ship thousands of feet long broke through the thick clouds and fog. The body of the ship shone with countless talisman light, reflecting a golden glow on the surface of the sea. At this time, the whole ship tilted down, and with a rumble, it hit the surface of the sea, shaking and shaking, causing the surrounding waves to surge. It was only after a moment that it stabilized. On the deck, Wang Kading looked back at the dark clouds, patted her chest, and said with lingering fear, "Sister, we've finally passed that ghost cloud." Wang Kaiwei heaved a sigh of relief as well. 100 days ago, thunderclouds would gather on the surface of the ocean from time to time. Every single time, a tempestuous wave would arise, and a myriad of bolts of lightning would strike down from time to time. Fortunately, the restrictions on the Dragon Tooth Ark were incomparably strong, and it was specialized in resisting the waves and bolts of lightning, so they were able to safely charge out of this expanse of thunderclouds. Zhang Boyan was also standing with the two of them, and he said in a low voice, "I heard the elders in the sect say that there are thousands of miles of dark golden thunderclouds outside the Dongxing continent. When the wind and clouds gather, lightning will wreak havoc, sweeping across the sea. Not only will the fish and birds hide, even the cultivators have to stay far away. Now it seems that it is true. If not for this ship, I'm afraid only the manor head could pass through without a scratch." At this time, a voice came from behind, "After passing this dark thundercloud, the Dongxing continent is not far away." Hearing the voice, the Wang sisters turned around. Wang Keting was even more surprised. "Master has come out of seclusion." Wang Kaiwei frowned, and pulled on her clothes, saying, "Still not kneeling?" Only then did Wang Keting wake up, and hurriedly knelt down with her sister, saying respectfully, "Disciple welcomes master out of seclusion." Zhang Yan walked over, smiled, and raised his hand, saying, "Get up, there are no outsiders here, no need to stand on ceremony." The two sisters stood up. Zhang Yan turned to Zhang Boyan and cupped his hands, saying, "I have been in seclusion for the past few days. Thank you, Mr. Zhang, for protecting my two disciples." Zhang Boyan cupped his hands. He said, "I'm ashamed. I only borrowed the boat's restriction, but even so, the restriction was mostly destroyed." Zhang Yan said with a smile, "It doesn't matter. I just need to spend some more time to refine it." He exchanged a few words with Zhang Boyan. He saw that the sea had already calmed down. He then returned to the room and sat down on the jade couch. It had been 15 months since they set sail from the Donghua continent. Although it seemed long, it was only a short instant for cultivators who frequently went into seclusion for dozens of years. During this period of time, due to the help of the Gantian Junyang essence qi, his cultivation improved by a lot. He calculated that after this ball of essence qi was completely refined, he would be able to successfully step into the second stage of yuanying. He originally wanted to use this chance to learn the spell that the sect leader gave to the talisman. However, he didn't expect that there was a restriction in the talisman that prevented him from viewing it. As such, he had to spend an hour every day using his spiritual power to force it out. Just now, he was slowly dispelling it. The sect leader's actions weren't without reason. He noticed that each time he activated the restriction, he would be able to verify a spell that he had learned long ago. Only today did he completely remove this restriction, and he had some guesses about its origins. He pointed at his forehead, and the acupoint jumped. A golden light shot out from within and landed on the table in front of him. It then turned into 2 talisman books. He bent over slightly and stretched out his hand to pick up one of them. He couldn't help but smile and thought to himself, "So it is like this." He shook the talisman and it turned into dust. He then picked up the other talisman book and opened it. He realized that it was a secret order given to him by the sect leader. His expression turned serious as he looked at it carefully. He frowned slightly and stood up. Looking at the calm sea, he thought to himself, "This is a tricky matter. I'm afraid even Jinren Shen did not know about it beforehand." Back then, the founder of the Qinsang school had personally set up 6 restrictions. It was rumored that there were 6 ancient evil creatures sealed in them. No one knew where they were sealed in. However, this talisman book said that there was one hidden in the Dongxing continent. Not only that, the sect leader had calculated through the spiritual tablet in the ancestral hall that this restriction was restless. It seemed that someone was setting up a restriction. If this continued, it would be broken within 100 years. Thus, he ordered him to find a way to deal with it and not let anyone else get it. Although Zhang Yan had learned about the location of the restriction from the letter, as a disciple of the Qinsang school, he was restricted by the ancestral master's order and could not make the first move. This was not a joke. Back then, the Su clan had plotted to steal the restriction of the ancestral master, which was why they were annihilated. Zhang Yan thought for a while. The contents of the letter were indeed unexpected. However, after thinking about it carefully, it was still an opportunity. However, the person who had the ability to break the restriction might be one of the major sects in the Donghua continent. He had no foundation in the Dongshan continent, so it would not be easy for him to do this. He thought that he could only go to Shenbaishuang's side residence first. At this moment, a sharp whistling sound came from outside the cabin. Then, a rainbow of 7 colors exploded in the sky. It was used by cultivators to summon people of the same path. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He concentrated his energy in his eyes and looked into the distance. He saw dozens of large boats 100 miles away, forming a circle around a white python that had a beard under its chin and a body that was more than 100 feet long. Outside of this, there were hundreds of small boats, and the people on the boats were all bare-chested as they shouted loudly. Although the python was covered in blood, it still raised its head and hissed. Its ferocity was gone. At this moment, it suddenly flicked its tail. With a bang, it smashed the big boat into pieces. A few people could not dodge in time and were smashed into meat paste on the spot. The rest fell into the water. However, those people were extremely brave. Not a single one of them retreated. Instead, they ordered the boats behind them to come forward and block the gap. On the deck, Wang Kading's eyes lit up. Along the way, all she saw was seawater and she was already bored. Now that she saw such a scene, she felt that it was interesting. She pointed and said, "Sister, look at those people. They are not cultivators, but they dare to find trouble with the white spirit demon python. This demon is so big, it probably has 100 years of cultivation." Wang Kaiwei looked for a while and said, "Sister, look, the flying forks and nets that those people are using are refined by cultivators of my generation. They are not ordinary objects." Wang Kading pouted and said, "The spiritual energy is impure. The person who refined the instrument may not be as skilled as me." Wang Kaiwei smiled and said, "Looking at the method of refining the instrument, it is indeed not as good as sister. But it can be used to deal with this python spirit that has not yet taken human form." Wang Kading blinked her eyes and shook her head. "Sister, you are wrong. Xiao and the others seem to have surrounded the python spirit, but they can't do anything to it. The python spirit is very cunning. It looks like it is in a difficult situation, but it is actually exhausting its energy. It is waiting to catch its breath. Sister, look, it is not as good as those people." Wang Kaiwei was startled. She looked carefully again and was surprised. Just as the two of them were talking, the python spirit had smashed another 2 ships in succession, causing those people to be thrown into disorder for a while. But she just couldn't see any signs of it looking for an opportunity to escape. What her younger sister said was indeed correct. Zhang Yan was also paying attention to the movements of those people. After listening to Wang Kading's words, he nodded and said, "Kading's aptitude is indeed better than Saiwei's. You are also very observant. If your thoughts were not so jumpy and focused on cultivation, your cultivation should have already seen the door of core formation." He pondered for a moment. Since those people were using magic tools, they should be related to cultivators. He said, "Kaiwei, Kading, those people are definitely not a match for the python spirit. You should go and help them. Also, ask them where this place is." When the Wang sisters heard the voice transmission, they did not dare to disobey and agreed in unison. Then, they each flew away on a ray of light. At this moment, on the dozens of big boats, a tall and sturdy man was giving orders, ordering the people on both sides to continuously throw flying pitchforks at the python spirit. But his expression was solemn, and there was a hint of anxiety in his eyes. He turned around and asked an old man, "Eldarin, second uncle's fleet hasn't arrived yet, has it?" Although the elder was slightly older, he was still in good spirits. His robes were unbuttoned, revealing a chest that was as dark as iron. He laughed loudly and replied in a voice that was as loud as a bell, "It's even better that he didn't come. With over 300 ships and a few thousand men, can't we take down a heavily injured white spirit python? If we cut off this good body, we can definitely sell it for a good price in Celestial Gathering City." The sturdy man looked around and said in a low voice, "Eldarin, you may not know this, but half of the flying pitchforks have been stolen by someone. The ones left in the cabin are only ordinary items." Eldarin's expression changed greatly. He grabbed the sturdy man's arm and said, "What happened? When did you find out? Why didn't I know? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" The sturdy man said apologetically, "I only found out about this when little E came to report. I didn't want to disturb the minds of the men, so I didn't say it clearly." Eldarin said angrily, "Someone is trying to harm you." However, the sturdy man shook his head and said, "Eldarin, now is not the time to think about this. I'm thinking about how to bring the men back safely." Eldarin's expression was extremely solemn. If they didn't have enough magic tools, not only would they not be able to take down this demonic python, but they might also lose all of their disciples here. He grabbed the leather pouch at his waist and gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine. He said resolutely, "Give me all the flying pitchforks. I'll stall this demon. You take the men and leave. Take as many of them as you can. I'll entrust my little grandson to you." The sturdy man was startled. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly heard a cry in front of him. The demonic python swung its long tail, which was as thick as a water bucket. In an instant, it smashed another large boat into pieces. This time, it didn't retract its tail. Instead, it took advantage of the momentum and smashed two large boats in a row. Its remaining force was not exhausted, and it swept towards the two men. Their expressions changed abruptly, and they couldn't be bothered about anything else as they leaped into the water. But right at this moment, they heard a delicate shout as a bright and clear light descended, and with a swish, the python's tail was slashed cleanly into two. Chapter 6:18. P.S. There's one more update. In the evening the white python spirit was killed in the blink of an eye. Both Seniorin and the robust man were stunned. When they raised their heads to look again, they saw two identical white-clothed young women standing in midair. Their sleeves fluttered in the wind, and only now did they come to a sudden realization. The burly man knelt down and respectfully said, "So it was the two immortal masters who helped us. I am Xiao Tong, and I thank you for saving our lives on behalf of the 3,000 men here." Wang Kating saw that although his attitude was respectful, there was no fear in his expression. It was obvious that this was not the first time he had dealt with cultivators. Her beautiful eyes turned and she smiled lightly, "There's no need to thank me. I'm here to ask you about something. Dealing with this little snake is just a matter of convenience." Eldarin walked to the bow of the boat and discreetly shielded Xiao En behind him. He said in a low voice, "I wouldn't dare. Please ask me anything, immortal master. I will tell you everything I know." There were quite a few disciples in the Xiao clan who had entered the celestial sect, and they often came and went, but most of them came and went by means of instruments. They had never seen anyone who could fly in the air like this. They guessed that the two girls' magical powers were very high, so they were very careful. Wang Kating asked, "May I know where this place is?" A trace of surprise flashed through Eldarin's eyes, but he quickly replied, "Reporting to Master Celestial, 300 kilometers from north to south and 280 kilometers from east to west are all within the boundaries of my Jingyu kingdom." Wang Kating asked curiously, "But I can see within 1,000 li. It's just an island." Eldarin bowed and said, "Master Celestial is right. That island is where my Jingyu country is located." Wang Kating chuckled, "So that's how it is. Your Jingyu kingdom isn't that big." Eldarin suddenly lifted his head and puffed out his chest. "My Jingyu kingdom may not be big, but it has 300,000 citizens and more than 10,000 boats. Among the 300 kingdoms in the Western realm, we can be considered one of the best." Wang Kating was slightly surprised. Then, as if she had understood something, she withdrew her smile. He nodded. He asked, "Do you know how far the Dongshin continent is from here?" A confused expression appeared on Old N's face as he shook his head and asked, "Where is that?" This old man has never heard of it. At this time, the brawny man interrupted, "Immortal Master, are you talking about the location of the Chu Empire?" Wang Kating was a smart woman. She thought for a while. He felt that perhaps these mortals didn't know about the Dongshin continent. Thus, he cast his gaze towards the brawny man. "You speak." Upon hearing this, the burly man slightly bowed and pointed in a direction, saying, "Immortal Master, if you wish to find the Chu Empire, then you can go to the Chu Empire. 16,000 miles to the east from here is the territory of the Great Chu." Wang Kating saw that he seemed to be much easier to talk to than Eldarin, so she excitedly asked all sorts of questions. It was rare for her to be in a foreign land, so she was very curious and even listened to some interesting anecdotes with great interest. Wang Kaiwei saw that her questions were all unimportant, so she angrily glared at her and reminded her, "Sister, don't let benevolent master wait too long." Wang Kating stuck out her tongue and stopped talking. She waved her hand at the people below her, then rode the mystic light and returned to the Dragon Country's ship with Wang Kaiwei. Seeing the two of them leave, Olden wiped the sweat off his forehead and ordered someone to bring over a water bag. He wiped his mouth and said, "These two immortal masters are definitely not from the Celestial Gathering City." The brawny man hesitated for a while and said, "A few days ago, when Big Brother returned to the mansion, he said that if we see any cultivators from the outer seas, we must report to him." "Eldarin, what do you think?" Olden was silent for a while, then he shook his head and said, "Who knows what happened in the city? It's not an exaggeration to say that these two immortal masters saved our children's lives. Why should we cause trouble for them? Just pretend that we don't know anything." The brawny man nodded and looked at the white spirit python in the water. He said excitedly, "If we catch this white spirit python demon, not only can we report back, we won't have to go out to sea for at least 2 months. Olden also smiled, but then his face darkened. He said, "When we go back, we must find out who is trying to harm you." At this moment, more than 10 miles away, there was a flying boat hovering in the sky. There were 3 people on it, and the leader was a middle-aged man in his early 40s. He had an extraordinary bearing and said with an unhappy expression, "Chief Steward, where did this female cultivator come from? Didn't you say that the immortal masters in the Celestial City are welcoming the envoys from the upper sects today and that no one will come out?" The man who looked like a steward hurriedly bowed and said, "I dare not lie to you, old master. It's true." The 2 immortal masters came and went in a hurry. Judging by their clothes, they don't look like disciples of the Celestial Gathering sect. Perhaps they were wandering cultivators who happened to pass by and help Xiao San Lang. The middle-aged man patted the flying boat and said unwillingly, "Xiao San is lucky. If we miss this opportunity, it will be difficult to find trouble with the Xiao family next time." Chief Steward stole a few glances at him and said, "I think this isn't a bad thing." Recently, the Celestial City seems to be searching for cultivators from the outer seas. "Old master, why don't you report this to the higher-ups and say that the Xiao family knew about it but didn't do it, and that they have ulterior motives?" The middle-aged man's eyes brightened, and he said, "Good idea. Quick, bring me the secret whistle." Chief Steward hurriedly handed over a small whistle carved from gold and stone. The middle-aged man grabbed it, put it to his mouth, and blew on it. A faint, almost undetectable sound spread out. After a while, a person flew over on a cloud of smoke. This person's hair was tied into a bun, and his robe was embroidered with a fish and dragon coiling on it. There was a sword on his back, and his expression was extremely cold. He looked at the 2 people and said, "Are you the ones who called me?" The middle-aged man hurriedly knelt down and said, "Yes, it is me. I have something important to report to you." The Taoist said coldly, "Speak." The middle-aged man immediately told him what happened just now, but he felt a gust of wind around him. When he looked up again, there was no trace of the person in front of him. At this moment, the Wang sisters were riding a mysterious light back to Dragon Country's ship. Halfway there, they suddenly saw a cloud of smoke flying through the air, and when it stopped in front of them, they subconsciously stopped and looked over cautiously. They saw a young Taoist blocking their way. He had a fierce aura, and his gaze was aggressive. He looked at them and said, "Where are the two of you cultivators from?" Wang Keating heard his unfriendly tone and snorted, "And who are you? Why do you care what we do?" Wang Kaiwei didn't say anything, but secretly kept the Yin killer blade in her sleeve. The Taoist said proudly, "Let me tell you, I am the Sea Patrol Gongsun Zhang of the Celestial Civ sect. The Celestial Civ sect has a rule that all cultivators from the outer sea who enter the ocean realm must be under my control. If the two of you know what's good for you, tell me where you are from. If not, I will capture you and bring you back to Celestial Civ City, and then you will suffer." The three of them were only about 70 to 80 miles away from Dragon Country's ship. At this moment, everything that happened was clearly seen by Zhang Yan, but he didn't move. Zhang Boyan looked outside and asked, "Master, do you want me to do something?" Zhang Yan shook his head and smiled, "No need, jade can't be used if it's not polished. That person is just a small golden core cultivator, and his cultivation is not much higher than Siwei's. Let them deal with it themselves." As long as the Qinsang school was under the same master and disciple line, most of them would go out to look for medicine before they formed their golden core. Half of it was for training, and the other half was to look for fated chances. Ever since the Wang sisters entered Dao, they mostly cultivated in the clear nether heavenly lake. Zhang Yan brought them to Dongshan continent with the intention of training them. Unless they were in a life-or-death situation, he wouldn't do anything. On the other side, Gongsun Zhang spoke again, but he was ridiculed by Wang Keating. He was angry and didn't waste any more words. He opened his fingers and released a white smoke that spun like a waterfall. Immediately, a strong suction force was generated, as if it wanted to pull the two of them over. The two Wang sisters were already prepared, so they controlled their profound light and stabilized their bodies. Wang Keating shouted and threw an item into the sky. It was a jade talisman, and as soon as it rose into the air, 4 rays of light, green, purple, red, and blue, came crashing down. This treasure's original name was Sunken Tree Tablet. It was obtained by Zhang Yan from the Middle Pillar continent. Before he came to the Dongshan continent, he saw that Wang Keating did not have a suitable magical treasure, so he simply gave it to her. Gongsun Zhang didn't care about the two profound light realm cultivators at first, but when he sensed the great power of the 4 rays of light, his expression changed drastically, and he exclaimed, "Profound artifact?" At this moment, it was too late to dodge. He shouted and spat out a cloud of smoke from his stomach, which turned into layers of clouds in front of him. When the 4 rays of light came down, the wind, fire, water, and lightning all shot out at the same time. Although his body was shaken, the smoke didn't dissipate. At this moment, Wang Kaiwei floated over and went behind him. With a twist of her finger, a fierce saber light rose up and slashed in the air, cutting off one of Gongsun Zhang's arms. The Taoist was stunned for a moment, and he couldn't help but scream in pain. When Wang Keating saw that he had an opening, she was about to use her treasure to kill him, but Zhang Yan's voice sounded in her ears, "Disciple, this person is still somewhat useful. Bring him to me." When Wang Keating heard this, she immediately retracted some of her arcane power. Although she didn't kill this person because her master ordered her not to, she still wanted to make him suffer a little. She pointed with her slender finger, and the 4 rays of light from the treasure tablet landed. Like lightning, half of Gongsun Zhang's body was charred, and he fainted on the spot. She snorted and spread out her profound light, bringing this person over. She called out to Wang Kaiwei and flew back to the Dragon Country's ship. Soon, she returned to the ship, and as soon as she landed on the deck, she went into the cabin to greet Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan looked at the unconscious Gongsun Zhang and took out a pill from his sleeve. He said, "Let him eat this." Wang Keating took it and stuffed it into Gongsun Zhang's mouth. She threw it on the ground and moved to the side. After a while, the effect of the pill was liquefied, and Gongsun Zhang slowly woke up. As soon as he opened his eyes, he rolled over and took a few steps back, holding his broken arm. He looked around and said fiercely, "Who are you? Do you know that I'm the Sea Patrol envoy of the Celestial Civ sect? If you dare to harm me, the Celestial Civ sect will not let you go." Zhang Yan smiled. With a thought, he manifested the 3 strong clouds above his head. 2 of them were solid, and the last one was illusory. They all emitted 5-colored light in the air. When Gongsun Zhang saw this, his expression changed drastically. His eyes were filled with fear, and he cried out, "Yuanying Great Cultivator?" Zhang Yan's action was to test him. Looking at his reaction, he immediately had some idea of the Celestial Civ sect's strength. He smiled faintly and said, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun, I have just come to your place, and there are some things that I don't understand. I hope you can tell me the truth." Chapter 6:19. Although Zhang Yan had sent the Wang sisters to gather information, Eldarin and the others were not cultivators, so their knowledge was limited. However, Gongsun Zhang was different. If the cultivators of the Dao sect in the Sea region wanted to know about the Dongxing continent, it was best to get the information from him. Facing the Yuanying cultivators, Gongsun Zhang's arrogance was swept away, leaving only fear. He didn't dare to hide anything. After a round of questioning, Zhang Yan found out that the Dongxing continent was different from the Donghua continent. There were many vassal states in the continent, and they all had cultivation sects supporting them. Among them, there were 5 major celestial sections. Behind Dachu was Zhongtai's celestial sect. Celestial Luo sect was the largest cultivation sect in the Shiji Sea realm. It was worshipped by the overseas states and governed millions of people. Every day, they hunted and killed monsters in the sea, collected seashells, pearls, and other rare treasures, and traded them for treasures, pills, and other cultivation items. Other than that, there were hundreds of cultivation families of various sizes scattered across the vast sea. In name, they all served Celestial Luo sect as their sect leader. Although this sect was not small, the only person with Yuanying cultivation was the city lord. Compared to the 5 sects, they were still far behind. Zhang Boyan said, "In this case, the Shiji Sea is just a desolate place compared to the Dongxing continent." Gongsun Zhang lowered his head and said, "My Celestial Civ sect used to be powerful for a time, occupying 2 seas of the 5 seas realm. About 100 years ago, a group of demonic cultivators came from the other continents and fought with us in the Beima Sea. We lost a lot of our forces and had no choice but to retreat to the West Ji Sea. But when it rains, it pours. More than 10 years ago, a demon ran amok in the sea, devouring all the living creatures in the sea. The few great cultivators of our sect had no choice but to stop it. After this battle, although we managed to severely injure the demon and drive it away, 2 of our elders died. Only my master managed to escape with his life. Since then, our sect's vitality has been greatly damaged and we have yet to recover." A demon from another continent? Zhang Yan's expression changed slightly. He thought for a moment and said, "I was passing by and wanted to visit your city lord. Where should I go?" Gongsun Zhang hastily said, "Go northeast for 3,000 li. There's a majestic mountain over there called Dayue, and that's where the Celestial Gathering Mountain Gate is located. I'm the direct disciple of the city lord, and I'm willing to introduce you to all of you. Knowing that the few of you have arrived, my master will definitely be delighted." He was well aware of the Celestial Civ sect's current predicament. Moreover, he was only a small golden core cultivator. If a perfected Yuanying cultivator killed him, the city lord would never avenge him. For the sake of his own life, he was extremely obedient right now, his mouth full of flattery. Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, "This matter is not urgent. I still have something I don't understand. Fellow Taoist Gongsun, why are you looking for trouble with my 2 disciples?" Gongsun Zhang revealed a terrified expression and said, "Please don't blame me, perfected one. Recently, a supreme treasure from the upper sect's Zhongtai was stolen. Rumor has it that the thief came to our West Ji ocean boundary. Hence, The city lord ordered that all visitors from the outer sea must be strictly interrogated, and I'm just following orders. Zhang Boyan snorted and said, everything in the world that can be called supreme treasures all contains spirituality, how can it be stolen? Who are you trying to fool with this kind of nonsense? Gongsun Zhang laughed dryly and said, it's not like I don't know the specifics, I'm just following what others say. Zhang Yan thought carefully, and his eyes flickered. He said, perhaps this treasure isn't a talisman, but a cultivation technique. Gongsun Zhang was shocked and said, Perfected One, are you saying that it might be a secret tome of divine arts and Taoist techniques? Zhang Yan smiled and said, this is I's wild guess, don't take it seriously. Gongsun Zhang nodded. Zhang Yan looked at his cowering expression and smiled. He said to Wang Kaiwei, disciple, bring me a brush and paper. Yes, master. Wang Kaiwei spread out the paper in front of the table and placed the brush and inkstone on the table. Then, she picked up the paperweight and pressed it on both ends. Zhang Yan picked up the brush and wrote down a series of rare treasures on the paper. He then passed it to Gongsun Zhang and said, since your master is cultivating, I won't disturb you anymore. Celestial Gathering City is a gathering place for celestial guests from all over the world, so there should be many rare treasures there. I want to buy some. When Taoist Gongsun goes back, why don't you keep an eye out for some? Gongsun Zhang was in disbelief and said, Perfected One, you're letting me go just like that? Zhang Yan smiled and said, if Taoist Gongsun doesn't want to leave and wants to stay here for a few days, that's fine. Gongsun Zhang's face turned pale and he quickly waved his hand. He didn't dare to stay here anymore. He carefully folded the white paper and put it away. He bowed with one hand and said, then I'll go back now. He was afraid that Zhang Yan would change his mind, so he quickly bid farewell and left the Dragon Country's ship. He then flew away in a cloud of smoke. But after a while, he suddenly thought of something. He gritted his teeth and said, if those two didn't harm me, I wouldn't have lost an arm. I'll go kill them first to vent my anger. Those two people were not Taoist cultivators, so he used a spell and immediately calculated their location. After determining the direction, he quickly flew in that direction. Although the middle-aged man and chief steward Bai had left a long time ago, the sea area was vast and they had not gone far. In a short while, he caught up with them. The two of them saw him rushing over and were shocked. Before they could say anything, they saw a cloud of smoke coming down on their heads. The two of them did not even make a sound before they were ground into a pile of bloody mud in an instant. Instantly, Gongsun Zhang felt much better. He snorted coldly, then used his escape art and headed northeast. 6 hours later, he returned to Celestial Gathering City. Looking down from the sky, there were many buildings, halls, and platforms. The surroundings were filled with beautiful flowers and grass, stretching from the foot of the mountain all the way to the peak. One could still see the prosperity of the city in the past. There was a majestic pagoda hall on the peak. On both sides of the hall, there were golden bridges that extended into the clouds. They looked like two wings flying in the sky. It looked magnificent and extraordinary. Gongsun Zhang landed in front of the pagoda hall and reported to the boy guarding the door. After waiting for a while, he heard someone calling him in. He entered the hall with familiarity and knelt down. Disciple Gongsun Zhang greets master. On the cattail hassock in the main hall sat an 80-year-old Daoran. His hair and beard were sparse and his facial features were squeezed together. This person was the Celestial Gathering City Lord, Gongsun Su. In the battle with the demon more than 10 years ago, he only survived, but his face was damaged. Although he used spiritual medicine to repair it, it was still ugly. As a cultivator, he didn't care about his appearance, but he was the lord of a city. Because of this, it was hard for him to see others, so he hid in the hall to cultivate. Unless it was necessary, he rarely went out. Gongsun Su looked at him weakly and said, why are you missing an arm? Gongsun Zhang didn't dare to hide anything and told him the reason. After Gongsun Su heard it, he said solemnly, did you see clearly that there were 3 clouds above Priest Zhang's head? Gongsun Zhang said with certainty, I didn't see wrongly. Gongsun Su waved at him and said, let me take a look at that paper. Gongsun Zhang quickly opened the paper and handed it over. Gongsun Su took a few glances. He showed a confused expression. Some of these were herbs. Some were golden jade, some were spirit cores, and some were things he had never heard of before. But he couldn't tell what they were used for. What was written on the paper? It was the medicine used to refine by Yue Shi. However, Zhang Yan left out a few important things and purposely added a few things that looked right but weren't, so people couldn't tell them apart. Gongsun Zhang asked carefully, Master, do you want to see them? Gongsun Su said angrily, what do you want to see? Now that I look like this, am I going to embarrass myself? Give them whatever they want and send them away as soon as possible. As the two of them were talking, a cultivator in white walked into the hall. His clothes were simple and clean, without a speck of dust. He walked closer and sat down without any hesitation. He smiled and said, Master and junior brother, who are you sending away? Gongsun Su said angrily, aren't you going to accompany the envoy? What are you doing here? The cultivator in white said indifferently, what does the treasures that were lost in the mountain have to do with me? Even if I find them, I won't get any benefits. He glanced at Gongsun Zhang and said, what happened to junior brother? Why did you lose an arm? Gongsun Zhang smiled bitterly and told the story again. In the end, he said hatefully, I was tricked by those two scoundrels, otherwise, I wouldn't have ended up like this. The white-robed cultivator revealed an interested expression and asked, Junior Marshal brother, you said that their restriction boat is over 3,000 meters long? Gongsun Zhang nodded and said, yes. The cultivator in white was secretly shocked. A ship that seemed to have a seal on it and needed to be refined from a huge earthly fire heavenly cauldron, the other party's background was not simple. He thought to himself, my master once said, to go to that place, it's best to have a few people with profound skills and no foundation, this group of people is just right. Thinking about this, he said to Gongsun Zhang, junior brother is the most skilled in painting in our sect. Since you've seen these 4 people, can you draw their faces and let me take a look? If it's good, I'll help you regrow your arm. How about it? Gongsun Zhang's body trembled and he said in surprise, really? The cultivator in white said, when has junior brother ever seen me joke about this? Gongsun Zhang took out a brush and a paper. He raised the brush and in a split second, he pushed it forward and said, take it. The cultivator in white took it and looked at it. He saw the 2 beautiful women on the paper and they looked like real people. He couldn't help but click his tongue and said with a smile, this painting can be said to be a treasure. Junior Marshal brother is really generous. Gongsun Zhang ignored him and held his breath for a while. In the end, he took a deep breath and sketched out Zhang Boyan's appearance. The cultivator in white walked to his side and saw an old man with a thick demonic aura and a pair of eyes that looked like they wanted to devour people. He felt a chill and immediately put down the painting. He nodded and said, not bad, there's still one more person. But this time, Gongsun Zhang raised the brush and put it down. After a few times, his eyes suddenly lit up, the tip of the brush suddenly fell down, but after a while, he threw the brush, pointed and said, is Shixiang satisfied? The white-robed cultivator moved closer and saw that this time, only a back was drawn. However, with just a glance, he was shocked to see a majestic Taoist standing in front of him. He suddenly felt like he was looking up at a tall mountain. He couldn't help but hold his breath. After a while, he praised, good drawing. He carefully put away the 4 paintings and took his leave. Full of vigor, he walked out of the room and handed them to a servant who was waiting there. He said, send them to 6th brother. Tell him that these people are of great use to me. If they come to the Chu country, treat them well. If they are negligent, I will hold him responsible. Chapter 620. On the 2nd day, Gongsun Zhang came to the Qi Dragon ship alone. After greeting Zhang Yan, he said apologetically, what a coincidence. After I returned to the city, my master was in seclusion, so it was inconvenient for me to come and meet you in person. Please forgive me, but I have brought everything you need, spiritual master. He shook his sleeve and released a cloud of milky white smoke, carrying out dozens of jade boxes. Each box was half a foot square and neatly stacked in the cabin. Then, he took out a bundle of books from his sleeve and handed it over with one hand. Because the number of these rare treasures is really not less than 10,000. Is it true that you are a bad person and you are a tree branch in a flash? Zhang Yan immediately took it, and with a point of his finger, he untied the knot of the red silk. He slowly opened the binding sheet, and his gaze wandered around. After a while, he looked at Gongsun Zhang, and nodded, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun, thank you." Gongsun Zhang, who had been paying attention to Zhang Yan's expression, relaxed and said, "There are a total of 186 items that Jinren needs. Among them, 113 can be found in our celestial gathering city. As for the remaining 73 items, our celestial gathering sect is, after all, just a lonely city in the middle of the sea, so we are unable to find them. However, the Great Chu country, which is thousands of miles away, has a vast territory with abundant resources and abundant people. It is also the place where the Zhongtai sect was established, so it is 10 times better than our celestial gathering sect. The immortal city in the continent of the East Victory continent was just like a prefecture in the mortal world, and it was a place that was accessible from all directions. Besides some treasures of the heavens and the earth that could only be chanced upon by luck, ordinary treasures could be gathered as long as a cultivator was able to pay the price." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "If that's the case, then I'll have to go and see for myself." While the two of them were talking, the Wang sisters took the opportunity to check the contents of the jade box against the bindings. Finally, he said, "Benevolent teacher, not even a little bit off." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said to Gongsun Zhang, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun, how much are these precious materials worth?" Gongsun Zhang bowed and said, "Jinren Zhang, everything here is a gift from my city lord. There's no need to discuss the price." A foreign Yuanying cultivator was loitering in the celestial Civ sect's territory. The city lord, Gongsun Su, could not help but feel uneasy. He also saw that although Zhang Yan needed a wide variety of items, they were all rare. Thus, he was prepared to suffer some losses. He wanted to get rid of this matter as soon as possible. Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun must be joking. How can I take it for free?" After thinking for a while, he took out a jade box and used his magic power to send it down. Gongsun Zhang subconsciously reached out to take it. He looked inside. He discovered that the box was filled with tiny beads the size of rice grains. Every single one of them was round, plump, translucent, and bright, and dazzling. He couldn't help but reveal a look of shock. The reason why the celestial Civ city was prosperous in the past was because of the deep-sea spirit shells that were collected from the North Mo and West G seas. However, compared to the spirit shells that were nurtured by the mountains and rivers, sea shells were far from the spirit shells that were nurtured by the mountains and rivers, not to mention these 1 in 100 shell pearls. Just this box alone was worth more than 100,000 sea shells. It was more than enough to buy all the precious materials in front of him. He weighed the box of shell pearls in his hand and hesitated for a while before saying carefully, "Jinren, you've given me too much." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun, you've gone through a lot of trouble. Previously, because of a misunderstanding, my disciple had rashly chopped off one of your arms. The rest is a gift to you as an apology." Of course, he could take these medicinal materials for free, but doing so would make the celestial Civ sect somewhat dissatisfied. He didn't come back to Dongsheng for a short while. He was ordered by the sect master to find a way to establish a foothold here. The fact that the celestial Civ city was able to stand here for thousands of years and go through 2 major changes in a row without being forcibly occupied by others showed how deep its foundation was. It wasn't as simple as it looked on the surface. If he left a bad impression, it would definitely affect his subsequent actions, so there was no need to take advantage of this small advantage. Gongsun Zhang was stunned for a while and looked at the shell pearls in his hand. After a while, he put them away, then cupped one hand and said sincerely, "Thank you, Jinren Zhang, for your generous gift." Although he was a small gold core cultivator, he had only entered the Tao for about 200 years. If he could cleanse himself with the elixir concocted by the 7 leaves Xuanzhen grass, he would still have some hope of reaching the Yuanying realm. However, this kind of spiritual grass was really expensive, and he still lacked a lot of what he had accumulated over the years. Now that he had the pen and the jade pearls, he could just about make up for what he lacked before. At this moment, Zhang Yan took out a letter that was sealed with a restrictive spell and threw it down. He said, "It's a pity that your castellan is not available. I will leave for Chu country in a few days. I'll pay you a visit in the future. Please pass this letter on to me." Gongsun Zhang hurriedly reached out and took it. Seeing that Zhang Yan had the intention to send him off, he stood up and bowed, saying goodbye and leaving. After getting out of the Dragon Country's ship, he suddenly thought, if I destroy the letter and secretly swallow these jade pearls, I think no one will know. However, as soon as this thought appeared, his whole body shivered and immediately extinguished it. Judging from Zhang Yan's words, he would still come back to visit the sect in the future. Even if there was no letter, there was still a possibility that it would be leaked. Moreover, this was an act of deceiving his master. If someone found out, there would be no place for him in the sect anymore. Thinking of this, he shook his head and cast a mysterious light, returning to the celestial gathering city. In the Dragon Country's ship, Zhang Yan released a gust of strong wind and rolled the dozens of jade boxes into his sleeve. He said to his 2 female disciples, "After I change my flying magic tool, we'll be on our way." After traveling for another 10,000 miles, he would arrive at the Dongshin continent. However, not only was the Dragon Country's ship too eye-catching, but most of the restrictive spells were also damaged, so he couldn't fly anymore. Therefore, he had to find another vehicle. He took out the restriction talisman and waved it casually, putting the ship away first. Then, he made a hand seal and lightly tapped his teeth. After chanting a few incantations, a cloud of smoke came out of his sleeve and condensed into a cloud raft. There was a cloud tent on it, and it slowly rotated in the air. He didn't know which elder of the demon sect used to have this treasure, but he used it casually. After transforming it to 3 to 4 meters in size, he called Zhang Boyan and the Wang sisters over. Then, he activated his magic power, and the 4 of them flew toward the east at a moderate speed. After traveling for about 4 hours, they saw a young cultivator in front of them. This person was standing on a green leaf and saw a cloud raft. He was wearing a green robe and his cultivation was only at the clear chi stage. After seeing the cloud raft, he was stunned for a moment. After a while, he came up and shouted, "Is this an esteemed guest from the outer endless sea ahead? Let's keep our jade toes for now." When Zhang Yan heard this, he thought for a moment and used his magic power to hold the cloud raft down. He said to Wang Kading, "Disciple, go and ask what's the matter." Wang Kading responded and got off the cloud raft. She flew forward and said, "Who are you? Why are you looking for us?" The cultivator saw that he had found the right person and his face lit up. He bowed and said, "I am Xiao Yin, a disciple of the Celestial Civ sect. I took the liberty to come here today to thank the seniors for saving my Xiao clansmen yesterday." Wang Kading thought of the people he saved yesterday and said, "Oh, so you are from the same clan." It was nothing. Xiao Yin raised his head and said seriously, "To the seniors, it is a small matter, but to me, it is a great favor. I have to repay it. Today, I present a geomancy map of the 2 seas to express my gratitude. I hope you will accept it." He took out a scroll from his sleeve and held it over his head with both hands. However, Wang Kading snorted and said, "Your Celestial Civ sect is so dishonest. Previously, my master also asked Gongsun Zhang about the sea map, but he said he never had it. So it turns out he was lying to us." Xiao Yin hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Senior, you've misunderstood. Martial Uncle Gongsun said there is no such thing, so there really is no such thing. This sea map of mine was drawn by my master when he was traveling. After my master passed away, it has been kept by me. Very few people know about it. Wang Keating glanced at him and gently raised her wrist to take the map from Xiao Yin's hand. She said, "Thank you, elder." Xiao Yin was happy to see him accept it. He bowed and said, "Then I won't delay the seniors any longer. I will take my leave now." After bowing again, he rode his flying leaf and flew across the sky. Wang Kaiwei picked up the scroll and patted it in her palm. She then turned back to the cloud raft and said, "Master, that Taoist sent a map." Zhang Yan took it and spread it out on the table. A ray of light rose from the map and revealed countless geographical figures. He scanned it and was surprised. He originally thought that this sea map was only the West Sea Jie Jie Jie. He didn't think that the North Sea Jie would be included as well. What was even rarer was that the cities, sects, and families along the coast of the Dongshin continent, the products and population, as well as the distribution of the mountains and rivers were all indicated. The content was very detailed. However, when he looked further into the continent, it was blank. It didn't look like it was purposely erased. Rather, the person who drew the map didn't have time to finish drawing it. Although Taoist cultivators could find the place they wanted to go based on the general direction and the direction of the land veins, it still took a lot of effort. Especially in an unfamiliar place like the Dongshin continent, it was even more difficult. However, with this map, it was much more convenient. Zhang Yan looked at the map for a while and found the location of the mountain gate. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "Just this map is enough to make up for all the pill materials from before." At this time, he already had an idea in his heart, so he didn't delay any longer. He put away the map and cast a spell to speed up the cloud raft. He turned and headed northeast. The journey was calm. After 2 days, they arrived at the coastal sea of the Dongshin continent. The sea was dotted with white sails and there were many boats coming and going. In front of them was the border of the Great Chu. There was a celestial city called Xingkang near the sea. There were cultivators from the Zhongtai sect guarding it. If cultivators from other continents entered the city, they would definitely come to check. Therefore, the group of people didn't go near but continued north along the coast. After another 5 days, they heard the sound of the river rushing. Looking around, they saw that the river was extremely wide. There were still many pieces of ice that hadn't melted in it that were washed into the sea with the water. According to the map, this river was called Reed Night. If they continued north for another 50 to 60,000 miles, they would reach the Beima Ocean world. And walking along this big river to the east, they would arrive at a place called Divine House Mountain. This mountain occupied the extreme north of the Dongshin continent. From east to west, it stretched endlessly. It was unknown how many tens of thousands of miles it was. Zhang Yan stood on the cloud raft and raised his eyes to look. At the end of the horizon, what entered his eyes was a vast mountain range. White snow covered the top and the frosty cold sky. It was majestic and magnificent. If what Shen Baishuang said wasn't necessary, the mountain gate of the villa he built was in that mountain range. Chapter 621. P.S. There will be more at night. 300 years ago, Shen Baishuang, who was already in the 3rd stage of yuanying, was ordered by his master to go to Dongshin continent to avoid internal strife. When he arrived at Shenwu Mountain, he saw that it was a spirit vein. The mountain was majestic, and because it was located in the extreme north of Dongshin continent, it was not under the control of the 5 major sections. He expelled an evil sect and temporarily settled here. He built a cave and named it Hanyuan. After taking in disciples and passing on his skills for dozens of years, he went out to travel again and never returned since then. 200 years passed in the blink of an eye. The flowers and trees in the courtyard were not as colorful as they used to be. The ground was covered with fallen leaves. Inside the cave, on a flat green stone, sat a middle-aged Taoist with a kind face and big ears. In front of him stood a young cultivator who looked to be in his 20s. The middle-aged Taoist sighed and said, Junior brother Gao, no one in the sect can compare to you in terms of aptitude. It won't be long before you form your Dan, but for the sake of the sect's grand plan, I have no choice but to delay you for a few years. Do you blame me? The young cultivator said seriously, Senior brother sect leader, please don't say that. I, Gao Zhongyuan, am fortunate enough to be guided by senior brother sect leader to enter the sect. There is no way for me to repay your kindness. Why should I blame you? The middle-aged Taoist felt guilty and gratified. He sighed and said, It's rare. Junior brother, please go back first. I will give you an explanation. The young cultivator bowed and retreated. The middle-aged Taoist stood up and paced back and forth in the cave. He frowned and sighed from time to time, as if he was thinking about a difficult matter. After a long time, his eyes gradually revealed a sense of determination. At this time, a handsome cultivator with bright eyebrows and bright eyes rushed in. He shouted from 10 feet away, The disciples of Mount E are getting more and more arrogant. They dare to wander in front of our sect. Senior brother, we can't let this go on for long. You have to think of a plan. The middle-aged Taoist looked at him and said in a deep voice, Junior brother Wen, you came at the right time. I was looking for you about this matter. When the handsome cultivator heard this, he immediately became spirited. He sat down excitedly. Senior brother, have you made up your mind to fight against Mount E? I have already said that if you take a step back, you advance 10. We might as well fight it out. Life and death are up to fate. The middle-aged Taoist shook his head. He said, I was thinking about something. Did he agree to the request of the Emshin sect and give up this immortal's cave on Sangzhu Peak? What? Junior brother Wen was stunned, then he stood up. He pointed at Taoist Chu and said furiously, Chu Muron, what nonsense are you spouting? How can Master's foundation be ruined in our hands? Taoist Chu looked at him with a calm expression and said, Junior brother, sit down and listen to what I have to say. Junior brother Wen glared at him for a while before sitting down heavily. Chu Taoist priest considered his words for a moment, then slowly said, Shidi, if En Shifu, the senior, is still here, no one would dare to bully our Han Yuan cave. But En Shifu has been gone for more than 200 years. Let's not talk about Mount E Pai, just look at the dozens of sects on this Shinwu mountain, which one of them does not covet my immortal's cave? There were many underground spirit veins in the cave of the hidden abyss. It was considered the best cave in the mountain world of the divine house. When Shenbai Shuang was here, because he was a level 3 nascent soul cultivator, no one dared to have any ideas about him. But ever since he left, the sects around Sangzhu Peak started to have their own ideas. If it weren't for the fact that they didn't know when Shenbai Shuang would return, they wouldn't dare to be too brazen and would have long since attacked him. Junior brother Wen said in a muffled voice, even so, we can't just give up the cave. Taoist Chu sighed, I didn't want to at first, but my master has been gone for a long time and hasn't returned. Junior brother, you know about the situation these years. Not to mention you and me, the younger generation of disciples can't cultivate. If the orthodoxy is broken, wouldn't we become the sinners of the sect? Junior brother Wen punched the stone table and said with hatred, if it was not for Mount E, how could this happen? If a sect wanted to continue, it had to recruit disciples and teach them Xian skills. This way, if the seniors of the sect passed away, they could reincarnate into the sect. But Han Yuan had not had a disciple enter the sect for 30 years. It was not that they did not want to accept disciples, but every time they were stopped by the sects outside the mountain led by the Mount Ame sect. They were the first to pick those with outstanding aptitudes. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that they were slowly destroying their foundation. Even if they were unwilling to give up the abode of the Immortal's cave, they could still achieve their goal once the lineage of Han Yuan was completely wiped out. Taoist Chu was originally very strong-willed, but the foundation of the Han Yuan sect was shallow. After fighting against them for 200 years, the situation was getting worse and worse, and there was no sign of Shenbai Shuang turning around, so he also lost confidence. The cave was silent. After a while, Junior brother Wen said unwillingly, let's wait for junior brother Zhao to come back. Chu Daoist smiled bitterly and said, what junior brother Zhao has brought with him is the last 10,000 spirit shells of our sect. Even if everything goes smoothly this time, the items we bring back will at most be enough for our 30 or so disciples to use for a year and a half. What should we do after that? Junior brother Wen said, we can drag it out for as long as we can. Who knows, Master might return to the sect by then. Chu Daoist shook his head and said, if you are not willing, I have another way. Junior brother Wen said anxiously, senior brother, at this point, why are you still hiding it? Hurry up and say it. Chu Daoist said slowly, among us brothers, junior brother Gao has the best aptitude. Those spirit shells were originally meant to be used as external medicine for him to condense his Dan. But this time, we have let him down. Luckily, he has no complaints. But we cannot delay him like this. I want to lend him the magical weapons that Master has given to us and order him to go out and search for opportunities. If he is able to break through to the state of Yuanying before our lives end, then we will not have to fear those people from Mount E. Junior brother Wen's expression suddenly turned ugly. He then laughed coldly and said, you recognize him as your junior brother, but I do not. If anyone is to go, it should be one of us three brothers. Who does he think he is? Is he worthy to be mentioned in the same breath as us? I will not lend him my magical weapons. Gao Zhongyuan was not a disciple of Shen Baishuang. He was born in a declining family of cultivators. Because he accidentally received a meridian opening technique from Shen Baishuang, he came to the mountain 60 years ago to be apprenticed to Master Chu. Therefore, he was regarded as a brother by Chu Daoist. Because he did not enter the sect through proper means, he thought that Daoist Wen did not like him. Chu Daoist knew that this would be the result and did not continue to persuade him. He looked down and said, then the only way is to move the sect to avoid disaster. Junior brother Wen's tone was extremely cold. If you give up the abode, how are you going to explain to Master when he returns? Taoist Chu sat up straight and said in a serious tone, if Master returns, he will have his ways to take back the mountain gate. But if Master doesn't return, the disciples will lose their Tao and no one will inherit the orthodoxy. Then we will both be sinners. Junior brother Wen said angrily, the sect is the foundation of the sect. Even if all my disciples die, I will not hand it over to someone else. Chu Taoist also knew that it was impossible to persuade him immediately. He suddenly showed a tired look, waved his hand and said, all right, Shitty, you don't have to argue with me, go back and think about it carefully, we'll discuss it another day. Junior brother Wen stood up and walked 2 steps away. Suddenly, he stopped and turned back, senior brother, if you do anything behind my back, I will not agree to it. After saying that, he left with heavy footsteps. Chu Daoist let out a long sigh. At this moment, he suddenly saw a child poking his head in front of the entrance of the abode. He asked unhappily, what is it? The child said, Grand Master, there is a letter from Elder Zhao. Chu Daoist's face lit up and said, give it to me quickly. He had previously sent junior brother Zhao Gu out to buy external items for cultivation. Calculating the time, it was about time for him to return. After hurriedly taking the letter, he waved his hand and the child left. Chu Daoist took a deep breath and opened the letter. His face changed and his hand started to tremble. He said with a trembling voice, how could this be? How could this be? Who would do such an evil thing? Zhao Jiyi's letter did not bring good news. He mentioned that he had bought a lot of pills and xian seeds in the celestial city of Chu. It was supposed to be a smooth journey, but on his way back, he was attacked. Now, he was seriously injured and was recuperating in a secluded place. He could not return for a while. Chu Daoist immediately suspected that it was the work of the Mount E sect. He was thinking about how to get Zhao Gu back when he heard someone calling out to him outside the cave. He forced himself to pull himself together and said, what happened outside? A young disciple outside the door said, Master, there are 2 female cultivators outside the sect who came to visit. They said they want to see the sect master. Chu Daoist was puzzled. When Shinbai Shuang was here, there were many cultivators who came to visit him. But after he left, such a situation rarely happened. He asked in a deep voice, "What is the cultivation level of those two? Can you tell where they came from?" The disciple said, "Those two female cultivators are riding on light. Looking at their clothes, they don't look like they are from the Shinwu mountain world." Chu Daoist's heart skipped a beat. He pondered for a while and said, "Call your eldest Shixiang to greet them and find out more about them." Outside the mountain gate, the Wang sisters stood side by side. Because they were both beautiful and had the same appearance, they attracted the attention of the disciples guarding the gate. Wang Kaiwei looked at the surrounding scenery and praised, "Sister, look. Even though the cave that Jinren-shin chose is a bit desolate, it is rich in spiritual energy. It can be considered a blessed land." Wang Kating pouted and said, "Compared to the Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake, it is still lacking." Wang Kaiwei smiled and said, "The Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake was originally a place for people to cultivate. Back then, Master broke the formation alone and made a great contribution. That was why he was given this cave. This cave cannot be compared. For a place like the Dongshan continent, I am afraid you can only look for it in the mountain gate of the 5 major sections. Don't be greedy." As the two of them were talking, they saw the formation of the mountain gate slowly open. A handsome Taoist came out riding on light. His gaze stopped on the two girls for a while. He came up and said, "I am Lin Xianchao, the eldest disciple of the Hanyuan sect. May I know which Taoist friend is here? Why do you want to see my master?" The Wang sisters looked at each other and smiled. Wang Kating took the initiative and went forward. She bowed and said, "So it is senior apprentice brother Lin. My daughter is Wang Kating and this is my sister, Wang Kaiwei. Today, we are here under the request of Jinren-shin from your sect." Chapter 622. Hearing the Wang sisters' intentions, Lin Xianchao didn't dare to make a decision on his own, so he sent someone inside to report. Reading a novel after Taoist Chu found out, he was both surprised and happy. He hadn't heard from Shinbai Shuang for a long time, but if he returned this time, then all his problems would be solved. He asked around and found out that the two of them were only at the Mystic Light realm, so he didn't think too much and decided to meet them. He ordered a servant to light up the mystic incense and sweep the cave before inviting the two of them in. After sitting down, Taoist Chu and the Wang sisters chatted for a while before asking, "Where did you two come from?" Wang Kaiwei replied with a smile, "The two of us crossed the sea from the Donghua continent." Donghua continent? Taoist Chu couldn't help but be shocked. Although the Donghua continent and the Dongshan continent belonged to the 3 eastern continents of the 9 provinces, they were extremely far away from each other and were separated by the Thunder Cloud Ocean. It wasn't easy for normal cultivators to cross over. He pondered for a while and said, "Just now, the two of you are here on the request of our sect's founding master. Forgive me, Daoren, for asking, did you two meet him in the Donghua continent?" Wang Kaiwei was surprised and said, "Could it be that Shinjinren never told sect master Chu about his background?" Taoist Chu felt a bit awkward and said, "I'm ashamed. As disciples, we are too useless. Our teacher didn't tell us which sect he is from." The two sisters suddenly understood. However, Shinbai Shuang once said that the disciple he took in the Dongshan continent was only an in-name disciple, so it was reasonable that he didn't tell them about his background. But now, it wasn't convenient to hide it. Wang Kaiwei said directly, "Shinjinren is an elder of the Donghua continent's Qinsang school. He has a very high status in our sect and is the sect master's junior brother." Taoist Chu had cultivated for more than 200 years, but the furthest place he had been was the Chu country. He had never heard of the Qinsang school's fame. He asked around a little. The Wang sisters didn't know Zhang Yan's intentions, so they didn't explain too much. However, just the bits and pieces that they revealed made Taoist Chu dumbfounded. Unknowingly, even his attitude became more humble. He cupped his hands and said, "May I know how to address my master?" Wang Kaiwei said with a smile, according to seniority, Kating, and I should call him Grand Marshal Uncle. Daoist Chu nodded and hesitated for a moment. He cautiously asked, may I know what my master has entrusted to the two of you? Wang Caiwei's charming face turned solemn as she said, I'm afraid we'll have to invite sect leader Chu to meet my master in person to know the details. Daoist Chu's expression turned cold as he cupped his hands and asked, may I know where your master is? Wang Caiwei said, my family's benevolent master is currently on the west side of Zhangzhou Peak. I stopped at a dangerous peak 100 miles away. Chu Daoist hesitated for a while. He could not confirm whether what the two said was true or false. After talking for a long time, the other party did not take out any tokens. He was not sure if he should go out and meet them, so he gave a look to a child at the door. The child understood his meaning. He said, sect leader, it's time to take the pill. Daoist Chu said apologetically to the Wang sisters, please wait for a moment. Daoren has some matters to attend to, I'll be back soon. Wang Caiwei smiled and said, sect leader Chu, please go ahead. Daoist Chu took his leave. He went to another cave dwelling and ordered someone to summon Daoist Wen. After he sat down, he told him the whole story. In the end, he asked, Junior Marshal brother, what do you think I should do about this? Daoist Wen had been looking forward to Shenbai Shuang's return day and night. Now that he heard the news, how could he hold it in? He said in a bad mood, Senior Marshal brother, what are you waiting for? Are you afraid that someone will trick us? It's not that I want to belittle our prestige, but with the current situation in the sect, how bad can it be? Daoist Chu was startled and seemed to have been enlightened. He stood up and said, that's right, I'm thinking too much. Junior Marshal brother, guard the sect tightly, I'll go and meet that Senior Marshal brother. He strode back to his immortal's cave and happily left the mountain gate with the Wang sisters. After traveling 100 miles to the west, he saw a cloud raft on a mountain peak. There were two Taoists on it, and one of them looked handsome and extraordinary. There seemed to be strong clouds floating above his head. He couldn't help but be shocked. Yuanyin cultivator. He saw that the Wang sisters were only at the mystic light realm, so he guessed that their master's cultivation was similar to his, but he didn't expect that he was wrong. One must know that in the Dongshin continent, a Yuanyin cultivator was enough to shock an area. Emshin sect had an elder who became a Yuanyin cultivator, which was why they could be so arrogant. Daoist Chu's gaze turned to the side of Zhang Yan, and he was shocked when he saw that it was an elder who was covered in smoke. There were also strong clouds rumbling above his head. It was obvious that it was another Yuanyin cultivator. He was intimidated by the aura of the two, and he actually didn't dare to go forward. Zhang Yan saw his expression, and he smiled. He cupped his hands and said from afar, are you sect master Chu? I, Qinsung Zhang Yan, greet you. Daoist Chu came back to his senses and hurriedly returned the greeting. He said respectfully, I don't dare, I don't dare, I don't deserve your greeting. Zhang Yan smiled and said, I believe my two disciples have already told sect master Chu about I's background. Yes, Daoist Chu said carefully, I'm here to ask sect master Zhang, what instructions does my master have for me? Zhang Yan said indifferently, Marshal Uncle Shen asked me to come here to take over Han Yan's cave dwelling. From now on, this Zhangzhou Peak will be my Qinsung school's other residence. Daoist Chu was stunned. He didn't expect that Shenbai Shuang would actually make such an arrangement. He couldn't react for a moment. After a while, he said hesitantly, I wonder if you have a token to prove it. He didn't doubt Zhang Yan. In fact, after seeing the latter, he believed 80% of his identity. With the two Yuanyin cultivators here, if they had any malicious intent towards Deep Cave sect, who could stop them? There was no need to go through so much trouble. Moreover, to be able to have a relationship with a big sect like Qinsung School was also what he wanted. However, he couldn't just hand over the entire sect to the other party with just one sentence. Zhang Yan smiled and said, I came out in a hurry, so I do have a token. However, I have a talisman that Martial Uncle Shin gave me. I wonder if you recognize it. He opened his palm, and a golden light shot out and rushed up half a foot high. Inside, a pagoda-like golden cover appeared. Under the sunlight, there were 7 precious pearls that shone with a dazzling light. Daoist Chu's eyes widened when he saw it. He then said excitedly, "That's right, this is the treasure that my master always carried with him." Seeing that there was no mistake, he didn't hesitate anymore. He tidied up his robe and bowed respectfully to Zhang Yan. He said, "Chu Mu Ren greets sect leader Xixiang. I hope you can forgive me for my disrespect earlier." As soon as he finished speaking, he felt his heart lighten up. The position of sect leader was indeed not easy. He had worked hard for more than 200 years, painstakingly managing the affairs of the sect, and even his own cultivation had been delayed. But now, he could finally put down the heavy burden on his shoulders. Zhang Yan went forward and helped him up. He said, "Junior Martial Brother Chu, you don't have to be so polite." Daoist Chu suddenly thought of something. He grabbed Zhang Yan's sleeve and begged, "Sect leader Xixiang, please spare my junior martial brother Zhao's life." Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed. He asked, "What happened?" Daoist Chu told him about his junior martial brother Zhao Ge being severely injured outside. In the end, he said, "Junior martial brother Zhao is an honest man. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't hold on any longer, he wouldn't have sent a letter to ask for help." Zhang Yan nodded his head solemnly. He said, "Since he's a disciple of Qinsong, it's only right for me to go and save him. I wonder what junior martial brother Zhao looks like and where he is now." Daoist Chu took out a talisman from his chest and said, "This talisman has a trace of junior martial brother Zhao's breath on it. It can help sect leader Xixiang locate him." Zhang Yan took it and turned to Zhang Boyan. He said, Zhang, I'll leave it to you." Zhang Boyan didn't say much. After taking the talisman, he cupped his hands and bowed. Then, he leaped up and turned into a yellow smoke that disappeared into the sky. Daoist Chu saw that Zhang Yan said he would go and save junior martial brother Zhao without any intention of rejecting him. He said gratefully, "Thank you, sect leader Xixiang." Zhang Yan smiled. "We're of the same lineage. Junior martial brother, you don't have to call me sect leader. You can just call me Manor Lord." Daoist Chu hurriedly nodded his head in agreement. He then said, "This isn't the territory of my cave of hidden smoke. It's not convenient to talk here. Manor Lord, please follow us." Zhang Yan nodded his head in agreement. Daoist Chu led the way and led the group back to the cave. He then ordered a boy to serve tea and fruits. He said, "Would Manor Lord like to see the disciples in the sect?" Zhang Yan smiled at him. "That's fine." Daoist Chu immediately called all the disciples in the sect, including Daoist Wen. They all went up to greet Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan looked down and saw that there were a total of 37 people. More than half of them had not opened their meridians. There were only 8 clear Qi disciples and only 3 disciples had entered the mystic light realm. One of them was the eldest disciple who welcomed the Wang sisters into the sect, Lin Xianchao. The other was a female disciple called Jiang Rou. The last one was Shen Baishuang's disciple, Gao Zhongyuan. Shen Baishuang took in more than 60 disciples in the past. Only 3 of them entered the core transformation realm. The rest of them died of old age. Those who survived had already left the mountain and reincarnated. When Zhang Yan saw that one of these disciples had entered the sect in the past few decades, he knew that there must be a reason for this. He casually commented a few words and dismissed the disciples. He then turned to Daoist Wen and said, "The Divine House Mountain is the highest place in the Dongxing continent. Sangzhu Peak is the first peak here. It is covered in ice and snow all year round. I heard that if you stand on the peak, you can see the Beima ocean world that is tens of thousands of miles away. Junior Martial Brother Wen, are you willing to take me there?" Junior Martial Brother Wen was startled. He then laughed and said, "So Senior Martial Brother is a refined person. Please follow me." Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. He left the Wang sisters behind and left with Daoist Wen. After the two of them left, Daoist Chu's mood was much better than before. He asked the Wang sisters, "How many disciples does the mansion master have?" Wang Kaiwei smiled and said, "Master has 7 disciples. This time, he only brought me and my sister." Daoist Chu stroked his beard and said, "Both of you have excellent aptitudes. You must be the mansion master's proudest disciples." Wang Kating interrupted at this time, "In terms of aptitudes, how can we compare to senior martial sister? She has already condensed her magic power and true seal and reached the 3rd stage of the core transformation realm. Even my 6th junior martial brother, although he entered the sect very late, he has already entered the core transformation realm before us." Daoist Chu was amazed when he heard this. Just Zhang Yan's disciples had a similar cultivation base as him. His evaluation of Zhang Yan rose by a level. He thought to himself, with this senior martial brother Zhang here, our Deep Stream sect might be able to regain its former glory. Chapter 623. P.S. Today is the first time Zhang Yan walked around the Cangzhou Peak for a night and checked the inside and outside of the cave. He had a clear understanding of the situation here. The Han Yuan cave covered an area of about 30 acres. There was a large hall halfway up the mountain used to gather disciples and teach them martial arts. There were also more than 100 houses, but most of them were not cleaned or protected. Therefore, most of the roof tiles were broken and covered with cobwebs. Not only did it not look like a Taoist sect, but it also gave off an aura of decay. Chu Mu Ran could not be blamed for this. In truth, Chu Mu Ran couldn't be blamed for this. Shen Baishuang didn't put much thought into this matter back then. After he left, the mountain gate lost its biggest pillar of support. It was already difficult to maintain it until now, so how could he have the time to care about the uninhabited places scattered around the mountain? All of this was actually a trivial matter to cultivators. However, as a Dao cultivation sect, it had been a few tens of years since a disciple had entered the sect, and they even lacked all the external materials required for cultivation, so it was a matter of life and death. If it was in the Donghua continent, it would not be a problem. Not to mention the 10 sects of Xianmen, even the second and third-rate sects and aristocratic families were equipped with jade elixir flower pools and spiritual shells. Even if the disciples closed their doors for 100 years, they could still cultivate without any problems. However, this did not work in the Dongshan continent. If the cultivators here needed items, they could only go to the Celestial City to buy them. The person in charge of the Celestial City in the Divine House Mountain was Jinren Yuanying from the Emshan sect. Therefore, Taoist Chu had to send disciples to the Celestial City in the Chu Kingdom to buy things. However, because the distance was too far, it was very risky. If they were not careful, they could easily be killed by evil cultivators. Junior brother Zhao almost lost his life this time. All in all, the Han Yuan cave could be said to be under pressure from both inside and outside. If Zhang Yan had come 10 years later, even the Taoist tradition would have been severed. Zhang Yan stood at the peak and looked at the rising sun. He could not help but think. Since the sect master ordered me to open a sect here, it seems that I will have to stay in the Dongshan continent for another 100 or 200 years. I must manage this place well. He said to Wang Kating, who was standing behind him, "Disciple, go and invite junior brother Chu here." Wang Kating responded and flew away on the mysterious light. Not long after, Taoist Chu hurried over. Zhang Yan said, "I invited junior brother here because I have a few things to tell you." Taoist Chu said respectfully, "Chief, please tell me." Zhang Yan, I see that the area is too small and it is too cramped. It is not appropriate for a master and disciple to live in the same place. When Priest Chu heard this, he secretly scolded himself. How could he not have thought of this? Junior brother, Chu said. Junior Shen, Zhang Hua said. Sect masters of, Jinren Yan, Celestial, he said. Junior brother, sect master of cheese, Zhang, sect, Zhang of. Yan, Junior, you are of. Fee. Junior Marshal Brother Chu, it's better for you to keep that cave for yourself. Priest Chu was surprised and asked a few more questions. Only then did he know that Zhang Yan wanted to build a few more cave residences in the mountain. In his heart, however, he was grumbling bitterly. He didn't expect this manor lord to care about his reputation so much. The construction of the palace required spiritual wood, stone, jade, and glass. This was not a small expense, but how could he take out the spirit shell now? However, this was the first time the manor head had arrived, so how could he go against the manor head's wishes? After pondering for a moment, he gritted his teeth and said, "Yes, I will definitely get this done." The reason why Tsangzhu Peak was so named was because there were dozens of thousand-year-old Tsangzhu trees growing on the mountain. Taking a branch from one of these trees, it could be used to refine magic treasures and flying boats. However, 100 years ago, when the disciples of Hanyuan sect fought with the disciples of Mount Yi sect, they won more than half of them. The remaining 3 saplings could be considered safe because they were within the mountain gate. However, without the spiritual liquid to water them, it would probably take a few hundred years for them to mature. Right now, he had no choice but to place his attention on them. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "This matter is not urgent, but there is another matter that needs to be arranged as soon as possible." Priest Chu's heart tightened and he hurriedly said, "Manor head, please tell me." Zhang Yan said, "I have observed the mountain guarding formation. The formation flags are simple and crude, and the spiritual light is dim. If we encounter a strong enemy, it won't last long. A sect's mountain guarding formation is especially important. If we can't even protect the mountain gate, how can we pass on our skills and teachings?" Priest Chu smiled bitterly and said, "Manor head, there is no one in our sect who is proficient in formations. There is a formation map in the celestial city, but the number of spiritual shells needed is in the hundreds of thousands. Our sect does not have that many, so we can only make do with it for now. The mountain guarding formation is best when the spiritual opportunity of the Earth meridian is compatible. This needs someone who is proficient in formations to set it up. Because it involves the foundation of the sect, it is not suitable to call an outsider. The Hanyuan Cave's foundation is still shallow, and there is no such person. To be able to stand here for more than 200 years without any problems was actually due to Shen Baishuang's influence." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I have some experience in the Tao of Prohibition formation. You can choose a few disciples for this matter, I have my own arrangements." Priest Chu was stunned at first, then he was overjoyed and said excitedly, "Manor head is proficient in formations. This is the fortune of Hanyuan sect." At this moment, a cloud suddenly flew up to the peak and landed. Priest Wen walked out and said loudly, "Senior brother, Manor head, there is a Jinren outside the door with junior brother Zhao." Priest Chu was surprised and said, "How is junior brother Zhao?" "He has taken the pill and is fine now." Priest Chu said, "Then why don't you call him over to greet the manor head?" Priest Wen said yes and immediately left to carry out the order. Not long after, 3 clouds of smoke flew down from the peak. After landing, Zhang Boyan walked out first, bowed to Zhang Yan and retreated to the side. Daoist Wen stepped aside, revealing the last person. It was a short and stout Daoist wearing cloth shoes and a tall hat. This person had a flat face, small eyebrows, and a sparse beard. He didn't look very impressive, but when he saw Zhang Yan, he became slightly uneasy. He bowed and said, "Disciple Zhao Gu of Hanyuan greets the manor head." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Junior brother, please rise." He said a few words in a warm and gentle manner, but Zhao Gu was only a yes man. When he asked who the person who attacked him was, he did not give a detailed answer. It was obvious that he was an introverted person and was not good with words. Zhang Yan did not mind. After comforting him, he said, "Junior brother Zhao has just recovered from his injuries, you should not tire yourself. Go back and rest first." Zhao Gu bowed his head to thank him and retreated. Priest Chu sighed and said, "Junior brother Zhao is an honest person. Originally, he should not have gone this time. It's just that junior brother Wen is impulsive and does things rashly. I have to guard the mountain gate, so I had no other choice but to let him go. I didn't think that I would almost harm him. Zhang Yan asked, how old is this junior brother? Priest Chu thought for a while and replied, when junior brother Zhao became my disciple, he was only a child of 10 years old. He should be around 230 years old. Zhang Yan nodded and said with a smile, I see that this junior brother's aptitude is above junior brother Chu and junior brother Wen. It's just that the skill that he cultivates is not compatible with him, so he was delayed. Daoist Chu found it hard to continue the conversation. Back then, the Xian technique was passed down by Shenbai Shuang. Because Zhang Yan's status was different and his cultivation was high, he could say that there was something wrong with it. But as disciples, they could not criticize their teacher behind his back. Zhang Yan did not linger on this topic. He took out a talisman paper from his sleeve and used his finger as a pen to cast a spell in the air. After 10 minutes, he took it down and handed it to Priest Chu and said, there are 3 skills in this, the 3 junior brothers can take it and cultivate it. As one of the top 10 disciples, he had already seen the most profound 5 gong and 3 scriptures in Qinsang school, but this skill could not be easily passed down. However, he had read the ancient books in the school in Jingluo Academy and knew quite a few superior skills. He might as well choose a few suitable for the 3 to cultivate and pass them down. Priest Chu immediately guessed that these 3 skills were definitely above the skills that he had previously cultivated. He could not help but be greatly excited and carefully put it away in his bosom. Zhang Yan took a look and said, junior brother Chu doesn't have a sleeve bag? Priest Chu blushed and said, junior brother Zhao went to Immortal City to buy spiritual items, so I lent it to him. Zhang Yan turned to Wang Kaiwei and said, Kaiwei, in a moment, take 3 sleeve bags and send them to the 3 junior brothers' cave abodes. Priest Chu hurriedly thanked him. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, junior brother Chu, I'll have to trouble you with something. Go to Mount E sect on my behalf and make an appointment with Jinren Yong another day. When Priest Wen heard this, he stood up excitedly and said, senior brother is making an appointment with Yong Fu? Then he said hatefully, this time, the one who injured junior brother Zhao must be a disciple of Mount E sect. Manner head, do not be courteous with him. Zhang Yan smiled but did not reply. He could see very clearly that the internal affairs of the school were not urgent, but the external crisis of Mount E sect needed to be resolved first. However, from the previous questioning, Mount E sect's methods were actually not fierce. For the past 200 years, the disciples of the 2 sects had never had a direct confrontation. Clearly, there were people who had a bottom line. There was no way they did not know the current situation of Hanyan sect. Even if Xiao Gu brought back some external cultivation items, he would not be able to hold out for a few years. They had waited patiently for more than 200 years, so it was not that they could not afford to wait a few more days. Although Xiao Gu was severely injured, the spirit shell on him was not taken away. This further proved that this was not the doing of Mount E sect. There must be some other reason behind it. Taoist Chu saw that Taoist Wen was extremely excited, shouting non-stop. He took a careful look at Zhang Yan and scolded, the manor master has his own reasons for his arrangements. How is it up to you to interfere? Shut your mouth. Priest Wen was startled. He looked angry but did not dare to say anything. Priest Chu turned around and said, I will go now. Does the manor head have any other words for me to pass on? Zhang Yan smiled, you can tell that fellow Taoist that he can choose the meeting place. Taoist Chu nodded in agreement, then bid farewell and went down the peak. He returned to his cave abode and put the 3 cultivation techniques into the restriction. He turned around and was about to leave when he slapped his forehead and said, Junior brother Zhao and junior brother Wen both have cultivation techniques. How could I forget to improve junior brother just now? With his talent, if he can enter the manor head's eyes, he will definitely be able to soar to the sky. After thinking for a while, he called a disciple and said, Go and get your uncle Master Gao. Tell him that I have something to tell him. The disciple left for less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn before he returned and said, "Master, Uncle Master Gao has left the mountain just now. I don't know where he went." Priest Chu frowned and thought to himself, why did he leave the mountain at this time? Chapter 624. Huanghua Hall, Mountamay Sect. R/Gao Zhongyuan looked at the golden and wooden pillars, the jade tiles on the floor, the bronze cranes, the pearls on the wall, and the smoke from the purple gold incense burner. He could not help but feel envious. When he first joined Hanyuan, he was just a youth and did not ask for much. He only wanted to embark on the path of Tao and rebuild the sect. But as his cultivation deepened, he gradually became dissatisfied with the sect. All he thought about was how to jump out of the broken gate of Hanyuan's cave. He believed that with his talent, no matter where he went, as long as he could obtain enough cultivation materials, he would one day become a great cultivator. The great elder of Mountamay sect, Yong Fu, sat on a blue and white throne. He had a scholarly appearance, with a pair of phoenix eyes that were full of spirit, a beautiful beard on his chest fluttered in the wind, from head to toe, be it his clothes, hair or beard, everything was neatly groomed. He spoke to Gao Zhongyuan who was below the stairs, "Fellow Taoist Gao, are you saying that this person is a nascent soul cultivator?" Gao Zhongyuan replied, "Yes. I heard that the person claimed to be martial nephew Shen. Chu Mulan has already handed over the position of sect leader." Yong Fu nodded slowly and said, "Well, fellow Daoist Chu has given up his position, so this person's identity can't be wrong. I didn't expect Jinren Shen to have a backup plan." He looked at Gao Zhongyuan again and said in a friendly manner, "Fellow Daoist Gao, thank you for coming here personally. Someone, bring me a plate of jade beads." As soon as he finished speaking, a green-clothed female attendant with a graceful figure walked out with a jade plate in her hand and a smile on her face. But when she reached Gao Zhongyuan, he did not reach out to receive it. Instead, he looked up at Yong Fu and said, "This time, Chu Mulan will most likely notice that something is wrong when I go down the mountain. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to return to the sect. I hope Shinren Yong will guide me according to what you said earlier. Please help me." Yong Fu pondered for a while, then nodded and said, "Although the situation has changed, my previous promise is still valid. However, it is not appropriate for you to stay in the E-Mountain sect. Let's find a famous teacher for you. I am sure you will not be disappointed." He took a brush and wrote a letter in a flash. After which, he tossed it down and said, "You have to keep it well. Take this letter and head to the Chu country's Inkheart Stone. When the time comes, there will naturally be someone coming to pick you up." When Gao Zhongyuan heard the 3 words, Inkheart Stone, he immediately relaxed. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your help, Daoist master. Junior will take his leave now." With that, he turned around and walked out of the hall. Before he left, he didn't forget to roll the jade bead into his sleeve. At this moment, he suddenly felt several disdainful gazes fall on him, but he didn't need to look. He also knew that they were Elder Yang's disciples, but he did not pay attention to them. The E-Mountain sect had been in charge of the Celestial City for 200 years, and the sect was rich and populous. This bit of jade beads was nothing to him, but how could these people know the hardships he had gone through to seek the Tao? He laughed coldly to himself. Even though these people were looking down on him right now, when he became perfected Yuanying, they would not be able to do anything about it. Didn't they still have to bow and scrape to him? The eldest disciple by Jiaying watched him leave and said in a deep voice, "This person deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors. Why does master still want to help him?" In a Taoist sect, the relationship between master and disciple was the most important. If someone betrayed his master, all the Taoist sects in the world, regardless of good or evil, would not accept him. Yong Fu said plainly, he only got one of Jinren Shen's incantations, so he isn't really a disciple. It can't be said that he deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors. Moreover, he was originally working hard for the sect, but in the end, even the external medicine that was almost in his hands was taken away by the sect for his own use. It's inevitable that he would feel resentful. Don't underestimate this person. If you give him a chance, he might become someone great in the future. As soon as these words were spoken, the 30 or so disciples, including Bai Jieying, were unconvinced in their hearts. Yong Fu looked at them, but he smiled and did not say anything more. From his point of view, Gao Zhongyuan was decisive in his actions. When he saw that there was a change in the sect, he immediately broke the door and did not have the slightest bit of reluctance. Such a person was mean, ungrateful, and ambitious. If he did not kill him, he would not feel at ease in the sect. It was better to send him out as soon as possible. At this moment, a disciple entered the hall and reported, "Elder, sect leader Chu of the Hanyuan sect is outside, requesting to see you." There was a commotion among the disciples in the hall. Yong Fu was also surprised. His eyes moved as he tried to guess the purpose of Chu Mu's visit. After a while, he said, "A guest from afar, please invite sect leader Chu in." Not long after, Chu Mu held a horsetail whisk and strode into the hall with his head held high. When he saw Yong Fu, he bowed and said, "Jinren Yong greets you." Yong Fu got down from his seat and walked to the bottom of the stairs to welcome him. He smiled and returned the greeting, "I didn't expect sect leader Chu to come pay a visit. Servants, take a seat." Immediately, 2 maidservants brought a chair and placed it below the stairs. Chu Mu did not stand on ceremony, bowed slightly and sat down. Yong Fu also returned to the hall and sat down. After the maidservants served fragrant tea, he asked, "Sect leader Chu is truly a rare guest. We have been neighbors for more than 300 years, but this is the first time you have come to my hall, right?" Chu Mu replied indifferently, "I am no longer the sect leader of the Hanyuan sect. Jinren Yong can just call me by my name." Yong Fu pretended to be surprised and asked, "Then who will be taking over the position of sect leader? Will it be fellow Taoist Wen or fellow Taoist Xiao?" Chu Mu replied, "Neither. It will be a senior martial brother of I." Yong Fu seemed surprised and said, "So fellow Taoist Chu has a senior martial brother. This seat is rather uninformed. How should I address this fellow Taoist?" Taoist Chu said bluntly, "My humble sect master is surnamed Zhang and is also a nascent soul cultivator. This humble Taoist has come here today under the sect master's orders to arrange a meeting with Taoist master Yong." Yong Fu's expression turned solemn when he heard that Chu Mu wanted to meet him. He asked in a deep voice, "When and where?" Chu Mu replied, "My sect leader has said that this can be decided by Jinren Yong." Yong Fu pondered for a moment, then said, "My Mountie sect and your esteemed sect are neighbors. With your esteemed sect leader taking over as sect leader, this seat should pay you a visit and present you with generous gifts. How can my sect be plagued with worldly matters? Moreover, the sect leader is in closed-door cultivation and cannot leave for even a moment. How about this, 2 days from now, at Fish Scale Slope, 100 li away?" Chu Mu secretly cursed. That Fish Scale Slope was actually still within the Mount E sect's sphere of influence. This Yong Fu was really very cautious. Although Zhang Yan had told him that there was no need to worry about the location of the meeting, he still argued, Fish Scale Slope's terrain is not only steep, but it is also a stretch of barren hills and unruly rivers. Wouldn't it be inappropriate for the elders of the 2 sects to meet there? Yong Fu chuckled and said, "Fellow Taoist Chu's words make sense. In that case, let's move another 300 li east and meet at Mount Iron Soldier's Constellation Valley. The scenery there is elegant. Although the outer mountains are covered in frost and snow, the interior of the valley is like spring all year round, with hundreds of flowers vying for beauty. Such a wonderful place, surely it would suit your esteemed sect leader's wishes." Chu Mu was startled. He did not expect Yong Fu to be waiting for him here. Mount Iron Soldier was adjacent to Sui School. This sect had always had a deep friendship with the Mount E sect, which was extremely beneficial to the other. Although he was still dissatisfied with this arrangement, it was still better than meeting in front of the Mount E sect's gate. As a result, He reluctantly agreed, then it's decided. He was also unwilling to stay here for long. After exchanging a few more words with Yong Fu, he stood up and bowed, saying, Jinren Yong, sect leader is still waiting for I to return and report. I will take my leave now. Yong Fu smiled and said, fellow Taoist, why are you in such a hurry? He pointed to the tea on the table and said, this is my mountain scripture cleansing tea. Fellow Taoist, are you not going to take a sip before you leave? Chu Mu said, no, Jinren Yong, please stay. After making another Dao salute, he turned around and left the hall with a flick of his sleeves. After he left, a disciple below mocked, this Chu Mu sure runs fast. Is he afraid that we will detain him? Someone else replied, I don't think so. I heard that Madame Chu was also a beauty in the past, but she was abducted by his disciple. I heard that he later took in a concubine whose appearance and figure are both first-rate. Could it be that he is afraid that he will return late and let some junior take advantage of him? As soon as he said this, a wave of laughter erupted from the crowd. Over the past 200 years, although the disciples of Hanyuan's sect had fought with the disciples of Mount Amei's sect several times, they had always lost every single time. They had even lost all the territories outside the mountain gate. Therefore, these disciples also looked down on Chu Mu Ran. The first disciple, Bai Jieying, was a righteous and prudent person, but when he heard this, he could not help but frown. He shouted, all of you, shut up. How can you all be so presumptuous in front of Master? How can you talk about other people's private affairs behind his back? How are you a Taoist cultivator? All of you, leave and copy the 3 enclosures Tao scripture 1,000 times as punishment. When the disciples heard this, they immediately lamented, but they had no choice but to obey. After His Highness saluted, each of them frowned and left one by one. Bai Jieying came to Yong Fu's side with a serious expression and asked, Master, are you really going to keep the appointment? Yong Fu stroked his beard and said, since it has been agreed, of course I have to go. Bai Jieying worriedly said, but according to Gao Zhongyuan, Jinren Zhang's cultivation is quite high. Since Jinren Shen ordered him to come here, he must not be someone easy to deal with. Maybe he will even give him some powerful magical weapon. If it was someone else, he would not worry for his master. But Jinren Baishuang was too famous in the past. Back in the Xinwu mountain, none of the cultivators who dared to fight with him survived. Since this person was so powerful, his martial nephew must not be too far behind. If he fought with Yong Fu, the consequences would be really unpredictable. Yong Fu shook his hand and said, there is another Yuanying Jinren in this Xinwu mountain. It is imperative that I meet this person. Even if I don't meet him today, I will meet him in the future. Bai Jieying was also helpless. Historically, the person in charge of the Xinwu Mountain Celestial City was the person with the highest cultivation level among the dozens of sections. Now that Hanyuan's sect had a Yuanying Jinren, if they wanted to discuss the matter of being in charge of the Celestial City again, Yong Fu could not hide from them. Yong Fu paced a few steps in the hall and suddenly turned around and said, all these years, I have done things with a lot of leeway. I am not an enemy of Hanyuan's sect, so I don't think we will fight to the death every time we meet. But I really do not know what this person's personality is like, so we must be prepared. Jieying, take my message and immediately go to Chu country. You must borrow Jinren Fang's magical weapon for me. Bai Jieying solemnly accepted the order and immediately stomped his feet. A smoke rose from the ground and wrapped around his body as he flew out of the hall and headed southeast. Chapter 625. After Priest Chu returned to the mountain, he immediately went to see Zhang Yan and reported what had happened. Zhang Yan praised, Junior Brother Chu has done a good job. May I ask, what is the background of the House of Noble Changes? Priest Chu said, the head of the House of Noble Changes, Sun Tong, is also a core transformation cultivator. This person has a close relationship with Yong Fu's disciple, Bai Jieying. Are you afraid that they have something up their sleeves? Do you need me to go and investigate first? Zhang Yan smiled, no need, I will go with Zhang Zhang this time. Priest Chu immediately felt relieved. There were 2 Yuanying cultivators, no one in the mountain could compete with them. Even if they were playing tricks, there was no need to be afraid. However, he did not forget to remind, Jinren Yong has a wide circle of friends and does not lack powerful magic treasures. You need to be careful, master. At this moment, Zhang Boyan let out a cold laugh as if he was very disdainful. Priest Chu looked at him in confusion. Zhang Yan glanced at Zhang Boyan and smiled, junior brother Chu is right. I will be careful. Zhang Yan had an appointment tomorrow and might have to fight with Yong Fu again. Priest Chu did not dare to stay any longer. Not long after, he bid farewell and returned to the cave residence with light footsteps. He first took out the cultivation methods that Zhang Yan had given him and sent them to the cave residences of Zhao Gu and Priest Wen. The 2 of them received the cultivation methods and were very happy. Although Priest Chu was also happy, he could not help but feel a little disappointed. After he came out, he made arrangements for the matters that Zhang Yan had previously instructed him to do. He then summoned a disciple and asked, has Zhong Yuan returned? The disciple said, I have been guarding the mountain gate for a day and did not see Uncle Master Gao return. Daoist Chu frowned and felt that something was amiss. At this moment, a disciple ran over in panic and shouted from afar, Master, bad news, bad news. I don't know who cut down one of the 3 dark red saplings. What? Daoist Chu's heart skipped a beat. The 3 dark vermilion trees were originally guarded by Gao Zhongyuan. Now that there was a problem and he had disappeared without a trace, it was obvious that Gao Zhongyuan had stolen the dark vermilion trees. He stroked his beard and beckoned the 2 of them over. You 2 are not allowed to discuss this matter. If you leak it out, I'll hold you responsible. The 2 disciples rarely saw Daoist Chu being so strict. They replied with trembling voices, disciple obeys. Daoist Chu shook his head and returned to his cave abode. He heard footsteps and a warm and delicate body came up to him. It was a beautiful and enchanting woman. Seeing that his expression wasn't right, she asked with concern, Master, why do you look so distressed? I heard that a new sect leader has arrived. Does he not treat you well? Daoist Chu shook his head and said, Senior Marshal Brother Zhang's cultivation is high and he treats people kindly. He is someone that Teacher Shen thinks highly of. He's 100 times better than me. It's best to have him as the sect leader, but... He told her about Gao Zhongyuan and sighed, I didn't expect this person to be a traitor. I treated him like a nephew. If it wasn't for the difficulty of cutting the dark vermilion trees, I'm afraid I would have taken all of them today. Now that I think about it carefully, this person has been acting strangely for a long time. I didn't notice it. When sect leader's senior martial brother returns tomorrow, I'll ask for his forgiveness. The woman came up and put her hand on his shoulder. She said gently, Master, don't blame yourself. You've worked hard for the sect for 200 years. It's inevitable that you'll be careless. It's just 1 less sapling. It's not a big deal. Daoist Chu smiled bitterly, you don't understand. The dark vermilion trees are not like the others. Even if these 3 are young, they're worth a lot. With 1 less, how can the sect leader's cave abode be built? The woman persuaded, since the sect leader is a generous person, he probably won't blame you. Daoist Chu sighed, let's hope so. The next morning, under the gaze of the disciples, Zhang Yan and Zhang Boyan rode the strong wind and flew away. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the horizon. These disciples had never seen the power of the Yuanying cultivators. They were all dazzled. Daoist Wen was even more excited. He said, Headmaster's cultivation is so profound. With Jinren's help, this trip will be worry-free. On the other side, Zhao Gu kept nodding his head. His eyes were filled with joy. He had obtained the technique yesterday. After cultivating for a night, he realized that it was much better than usual. If he continued to cultivate like this, he would be able to break through the shell and enter the second realm in less than 10 years. Only Daoist Chu seemed to have something on his mind. He forced a smile. Zhang Yan and Zhang Boyan traveled at an incredible speed. In less than half an hour, they arrived in front of the armored soldier mountain. Zhang Yan looked down and saw that amidst the snow-covered mountain range, there was a valley filled with birdsong and fragrant flowers. It was as if a green pearl was embedded there. He was also amazed as he pointed and said, "That must be Constellation Valley." Both of them were experienced cultivators. After circling the valley once and confirming that there were no formations or restrictions, they descended and stood still on a large rock. They were facing the entrance of the valley. Behind them was a stone wall. A small stream flowed under their feet. With a glance, they could see everything in the valley. Not long after, a strong wind flew over and slowly descended. It landed not far away and 3 people walked out. The person in the lead had a cloud of strong wind floating above his head. He had an elegant appearance and a beautiful beard that hung down to his chest. His movements were confident and at ease, as if he wasn't surprised by the appearance of 2 Yuanian cultivators in front of him. He strolled over and cupped his hands in greeting. "Greetings, fellow Taoists." Zhang Yan returned the greeting. "Are you fellow Taoist Yong?" Yong Fu smiled. "That's me. I heard that sect master Zhang had summoned me, so I came to keep the appointment." Although he appeared to be smiling and talking as usual, he was actually nervous inside. With 2 Yuanian cultivators here, especially Zhang Yan, there were 2 solid and 1 ethereal cloud above his head. It was clear that he was only a step away from entering the second layer of the Yuanian realm. Yong Fu also felt the pressure and could only pretend to be calm. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and pointed with a finger. An item flew out, and with a flash of light, an exquisite pavilion appeared on the ground, complete with cups, tables, and chairs. Zhang Yan extended his hand and said, "Sage Master Yong, please." Yong Fu looked unperturbed. He also said, "Please," and the 2 of them walked into the pavilion together. After bowing again, they sat down. Yong Fu was the first to speak. "I still haven't congratulated fellow Taoist on taking over as the sect master of the Hanyuan sect." He took out a jade box from his sleeve and placed it heavily on the stone table. "As a cultivator from the mountains, I didn't prepare any lavish gifts. I only have a box of amber stellar heroes. I hope you won't laugh at me, Sage Zhang." Zhang Yan smiled faintly. "You're too kind." Amber stellar heroes were extremely rare, and even for Yuanian cultivators, they were rare items. If it were anyone else, they would have been overjoyed. However, Zhang Yan was an exception. He had Jun Yang's spiritual essence, so he naturally didn't care much for this item. Yong Fu observed his expression and saw that his expression didn't change at all. Whether it was fake or not, it showed that this person wasn't easy to deal with. Zhang Yan didn't talk about other matters. He just drank with him and talked about some interesting anecdotes. Yong Fu also responded frequently. After about 2 hours, he finally couldn't hold it in anymore and asked, "May I know why fellow Taoist Zhang invited me here?" Zhang Yan smiled and put down his wine cup. He said frankly, "Nothing else. I just want to have a duel with fellow Taoist Yong." Yong Fu didn't ask for the reason and only asked, "How do you want to duel?" Zhang Yan said faintly, "I want to have a duel with fellow Taoist. If I win by a fluke, I hope fellow Taoist will give up control of the celestial city." When he was in the West Sea realm, he didn't have a deep understanding of celestial cities. Yong Fu stared at Zhang Yan and said, "In this battle, I will invite fellow Taoists from all over the Divine House Mountain world to observe and bear witness." Zhang Yan nodded and said with a smile, "That is how it should be." Yong Fu said, "Then it's settled." The 2 of them agreed on a day after the battle and made an oath by high-fiving. After drinking to their heart's content, they went their separate ways. On the way back, the disciple beside Yong Fu couldn't help but ask, "Master, are you confident in defeating that person?" Yong Fu thought for a while and said with a smile, "We haven't fought yet, so how would I know? That person's cultivation is above Master's, and looking at his aura, I think his ability in battle is not bad. However, if your eldest senior brother can borrow that treasure, then he has a great chance of winning." Chapter 626. After the battle between Zhang Yan and Yong Fu, he was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he stayed in the Constellation Valley to admire the scenery for half a day. Only in the afternoon did he slowly return to the mountain gate. But when he returned with the wind, he saw that Taoist Chu was kneeling alone on the peak for some reason. He was surprised, and after descending, he asked, "Junior brother Chu, what is the meaning of this?" Priest Chu lowered his head and said, "I have made a huge mistake. I am here to ask for forgiveness from the manor head." Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed and asked in a deep voice, "What happened?" Priest Chu did not dare to hide anything. He told the truth about the dark vermilion seedling being killed and Gao Zhongyuan breaking the door and escaping. In the end, he said, "I have eyes but failed to see. I did not know the right person and caused my disciple to rebel. The treasure was damaged. I hope the manor head will punish me." After he finished speaking, he silently bowed. After listening, Zhang Yan smiled and went forward to help Priest Chu up. He said, "Senior Marshal Brother Chu, quickly get up. How can I blame you for such a small matter?" Priest Chu hesitated for a while and said in a low voice, "To be honest, without this dark vermilion seedling, perhaps the hall can no longer be built." He would not have been so worried if only one dark vermilion seedling was destroyed. However, he had previously promised Zhang Yan to build a few more cave residences in the mountain gate. Even if the 3 seedlings were to be used as compensation, it would barely be enough. Now that one was missing, how could it be done? It was better to come early and ask for forgiveness. Zhang Yan looked at him deeply and said, "There is no need to rush the construction of the cave residences. We will discuss it in detail after I take charge of the immortal abode." The reason why Mount Yi sect could be so prosperous was because Yong Fu was the immortal abode master. Cultivation was never lacking in external resources. Dozens of sects in the Shinwu mountain had to serve him as the sect master. After he became the sect master, he could use him to strengthen the sect. Priest Chu said in surprise, "So manor head already had a plan." Zhang Yan faintly smiled and said, "Yesterday, I asked you to choose a few disciples. Have you found a suitable candidate?" Priest Chu hurriedly replied, "How can I not take manor head's instructions to heart? After careful selection yesterday, I've selected a total of 7 disciples." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Wait for them to come see me." After that, he stepped into the cave residence. Priest Chu looked at Zhang Yan's departing back in a daze. He could not fathom the manor lord's thoughts at all. Thinking back to the situation just now, it seemed like the other party didn't blame him. He felt a little relieved and stomped his feet. He flew down the peak. He didn't dare to delay Zhang Yan's matter. Halfway up the mountain, he immediately gathered the 7 disciples and summoned another cloud of smoke, wrapping these people up the peak together. At Zhang Yan's current residence, it was the top of Zhangzhou Peak. It was surrounded by cliffs that were covered by ice and snow all year round. There were no rattan ropes to climb up and down. If the disciples didn't have flying techniques, they would definitely not be able to go up and down. The few flying boats in the Hanyuan sect had long been exchanged for spirit shells, so Priest Chu could only do it himself. When they reached the entrance of the cave, Wang Kaiwei came out and said, "Master invites Uncle Master Chu inside to talk." After experiencing the incident just now, Priest Chu always felt that he did something inappropriate. He subconsciously wanted to avoid Zhang Yan, so he said, "I won't go in." He turned serious and said to the 7 disciples, "Remember, whatever the manor lord wants you to do, you have to follow his orders. If you disobey, you won't be let off easily when you return." The 7 disciples hurriedly agreed and then entered the cave. In less than 30 steps, they reached the inner room. The walls of the cave were already hung with jade beads, illuminating the place like it was daytime. An incense burner was placed in the middle, emitting a calming fragrance. Zhang Yan was sitting on the jade couch. Everyone's expression turned cold and hurriedly came up to greet him. Zhang Yan looked down and swept his gaze across the faces of the disciples. The 7 of them hurriedly lowered their heads. As they didn't know why the new Manor Lord chose them to come here, their hearts were slightly perturbed. After looking at them, Zhang Yan said, "The talents of the 7 of you can only be ranked low among the many disciples. It's impossible for you to live forever in this life. I have a technique here. Although it can't increase your lifespan, if you practice it well, the benefits will be endless. Are you willing to learn it?" The 7 of them were well aware of their own situation. They had all cultivated for 70 to 80 years, but since opening their meridians, there had been no progress. Unless they had a great opportunity, no matter how much they cultivated, it would be a waste of effort. One of the disciples dressed in blue stood up and said loudly, "Disciple is willing to learn." With him taking the lead, the other 6 people also voiced their agreement. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeve and a total of 7 talismans were sent down. In these talismans, there is a method to deduce the erosion runes. The 5 of you, take it and study it. Come back to me in 3 days. Although the 7 of them didn't know what the erosion runes were, they knew that their own opportunity had come. They just had to see if they could grasp it. They suppressed their excitement and bowed to Zhang Yan. He didn't want the Hanyuan mansion to be the same. Within 1,000 years, there would be 3 major tribulations. Although the first of the devil's tribulations was only in the Donghua continent for now, the subsequent 2 tribulations would affect the 9 continents in the world. Apart from those powerful cultivators, no one in the world would be able to avoid them. Under such circumstances, he wouldn't allow the foundation of a sect to be in the hands of others. He had to find a way to change it. To do this, he needed to set up the Jade Elixir Essence Pool, the Earth Emanations Spirit Vein, and other things that were essential for cultivation. He also needed to train people who were good at alchemy and formations. That way, even if the sect was sealed, the disciples could still cultivate and wouldn't be cut off. However, this wasn't something that could be done overnight. It had to be done step by step. Right now, he was going to start with formations. He planned to use 100 or 200 years to get rid of the dependence on the celestial cities. He gave them a scroll of Taoist book that he had already written and said, "Take this book. The 2 of you need to study it well. When I have time, I will come and test you." The 2 of them respectfully received it, knelt down, kowtowed, and left. Wang Keting saw that although Zhang Yan had taught them the Dharma, he didn't even ask for the names of the 2 disciples. She knew that he wasn't very satisfied with them. She looked around and said, "Master, do you want Keting to find some talented disciples for you?" Zhang Yan smiled and looked at her. This disciple of his was really smart. These few people really didn't suit his taste. However, in the current Deep Abyss sect, he couldn't find anyone more suitable, so he could only make do with them. He wasn't going to give up on the 5 people who left just now. He wanted to teach them other alchemy techniques. He thought for a while and said, "In a few days, I will send the 2 of you out to travel and look for external medicine. Since Keting is willing to share Master's burden, then do it well. Don't disappoint me." When Wang Keting heard that her master was willing to let her go out to travel, she was overjoyed and almost cheered. She bowed and said, "Yes, Master." Zhang Yan shook his head and said with a smile, "I will have to wave my hand and order the 2 of them to leave in a few days." After the 2 of them left the cave, he stretched out his hand and used his mana to set up a layer of restriction at the door. Then, he sat on the bed. The battle with Yonghe would be in a month's time. Even though his opponent's cultivation was lower than his, he didn't underestimate any of his opponents. Especially when he spoke to Yonghe that day, he vaguely felt that this person seemed to be inextricably linked to Chu's Zhongtai faction, so he couldn't be careless. Right now, he still needed a period of polishing before he could reach the second level of the nascent soul realm. In a short period of time, he wouldn't be able to increase his cultivation. Therefore, he planned to take advantage of this period of time to learn the technique that the sect leader taught him. After he calmed his mind for a moment, a thought arose in his mind, and row after row of profound techniques written in eroded markings floated up into his mind. Earlier, he'd already guessed the origins of this divine ability, and at this moment, he was able to comprehend it after a slight deduction. He couldn't help but smile, and then he used his finger as a brush to write 5 large words on the stone table in front of him. Chapter 627. P.S. The second update is a little late. There's still one more update because I have to wake up early tomorrow and sleep early. I won't be able to make it in the evening. I'll make it up around noon tomorrow. The Violet Sky Divine Lightning was ranked second amongst the 12 divine abilities of Qinsang School, and it was only inferior to the Great Coiling Dragon Lightning Seal. However, when Zhang Yan fought with others earlier, he noticed that the might of this divine ability wasn't very formidable. At least, it was still inferior when compared to divine abilities like the sonorous sound of 9 mountains and Triyang Qi. Although this technique seemed to have some skill in restraining evil demons, compared to its great reputation, it did not seem to live up to its name. Previously, when he used this technique, he mostly relied on his profound mana that was a level higher than others to condense tens or even hundreds of bolts of divine lightning to strike down at the same time. In this way, most of the people facing him would have to temporarily avoid the brunt of the attack. However, if it was someone else who used it, then it would be a waste of mana. At that time, he felt that this supernatural power would not be so simple and that there must be something that he did not understand. It was only when he received this spell from the sect leader that he was able to verify his thoughts. What he had practiced before was just a glimpse of the basics of this divine ability. Only by learning how to use it would he be considered to have truly learned it. The Purple Heaven Divine Thunder Net could spread out lightning and weave a net of electricity. Once a cultivator was trapped in it, it could be refined by the power of lightning. Zhang Yan let out a sigh. If he could learn this mystique during the sword competition assembly, then he would have another way to counter Feng Hai. However, when he thought about it carefully, if he hadn't made a great contribution to the sect, he wouldn't have been able to obtain this technique. Furthermore, this technique was extremely powerful. If he wanted to reach the point where he could control it as he pleased, he would have to cultivate diligently. Who knew how many years it would take? He shook his head and tossed aside all the distracting thoughts in his mind. He calmed his mind and slowly circulated his qi according to the method. At the Thousand Cave Cliff, the back mountain of the Emshin sect, Yong Fu sat on the altar and asked, "Disciple, have you sent the letters from the sects?" Bai Jiaying replied, "Among the 38 sects and aristocratic families, other than Longxiang school and Shi family, because their leaders are not in their schools, the rest of the 38 sects and aristocratic families are not in the school." He was not an outsider. The rest of the sect leaders have personally promised to come and be witnesses on the day of the battle. Yong Fu sighed and said, "I also know that the Shi clan leader went to Chu last month." Thinking back to the day of the duel, it could turn around. As for the Longxiang sect, he paused and continued, "Let them be." Bai Jiaying nodded his head in agreement. The Yi Mountain sect had been in charge of the Immortal City for more than 200 years. Because Yong Fu's methods were brilliant, the rules he set were not too strict, so all the sects on the Divine House Mountain obeyed him. Only the Longxiang sect was different. This sect had only arrived here 100 years ago, and seemed to have some background. Yong Fu had repeatedly warned them not to offend them, and later on, he had found the opportunity to ask a few times, but Yong Fu had always kept it a secret. Yong Fu seemed to be in a very good mood at the moment. He said, "In about half a month's time, I will be able to refine the Dharma treasure according to my will." During the time I am not here, I will leave it to you, my disciple, to arrange the matters of the duels. If any of the sect masters come, you must not neglect them and treat them well. Bai Jiaying said, Master, don't worry, I know what I am doing. Yong Fu nodded his head. He looked at the sky and said, the time is almost here, you should leave first, in case I hurt you when I refine the purple calamity fruit. Bai Jiaying bowed his body and left the cave. Yong Fu sat for a while and used his mana to seal the cave door. Then, he took out a jade-green bead and tossed it into the sky. He opened his mouth and spat out a breath of inner breath to support it. The astral cloud above him also spun continuously, releasing bolts of astral lightning that crackled and bombarded the jade bead. Along with the passage of time, the color of the pearl changed from jade to red. First, a wave of ghastly cold air filled the interior of the cavern, and then it was instantly tainted with a layer of frost before emitting a wave of scorching heat. Even the water within the cup was instantly evaporated. After 9 consecutive times, the restrictions within the cavern were unable to endure it any longer, and they ceaselessly emitted cracking sounds. If this were to continue, then even the cavern would probably collapse. Yong Fu hurriedly stopped what he was doing and walked out of the cave door. He walked into another cave on the left and took out the bead again. He did the same thing as before, but once the restriction showed signs of collapsing, he would have to change to another cave. After refining for more than 20 days, Yong Fu had changed more than 30 caves. At this time, the bead in front of him was only the size of a grain of rice. He felt that it was about time, so he retracted his Xian Qi and slowly sucked the bead into his stomach. After 3/4 of an hour, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, then stood up and muttered to himself, I've finally succeeded. With this fire and water calamity power, even if that Taoist Zhang is really at the second stage, I can still fight against him. He recuperated for a while, then removed the restriction in front of the door. Just as he was about to walk out of the cave, a clear sound came from outside. He listened carefully and said loudly, which old friend is here? Just as he finished speaking, a loud laugh was heard, and a tall figure strode in. This person wore a green short-sleeved shirt, carrying a bamboo basket on his back. His hair was messy, as if he had not combed it for a long time. When he saw Yong Fu, he brushed the hair in front of his forehead with both hands and smiled, Brother Yong, I was passing by and specially asked for a cup of water and wine. I didn't expect to wait for 10 days. Yong Fu was surprised, so it's Brother Jiang. Why are you here? Please come in and have a seat. The person did not stand on ceremony and sat inside. A few days ago, I was ordered by the 6th prince to capture the demon king and crocodile who stole the secret map. I chased him all the way to the Beima Sea boundary. Although I am more skilled on land, I could only watch him enter the sea. I remembered that the Mount Yi sect is nearby, so I wanted to invite Brother Yong to come with me and see if we can capture this demon together. Yong Fu sighed slightly and said apologetically, Brother Jiang, you came at a bad time. I have to fight someone in half a month, so I can't leave. After this matter is over, I will go with Brother Jiang. The Taoist surnamed Jiang was puzzled, then he pondered and suddenly realized, is there another Yuanying in the Xinwu mountain? Yong Fu shook his head, not really, but Jinrenshin's apprentice nephew has returned. The Taoist surnamed Zhang's expression changed slightly, is it Jinrenshin from the Hanyuan sect? Yong Fu said, yes, Jinrenshin's apprentice nephew has just returned and wants to fight with me to decide the ownership of Celestial City. The Taoist surnamed Jiang asked, are you confident? Yong Fu said confidently, if it was 10 days ago, I wouldn't dare to say so. But Taoist Zhang is confident in his skills and gave me time to prepare. Now that I have consumed the purple calamity fruit and borrowed a defensive magical treasure from Taoist Fang, I have a good chance of winning. Purple calamity fruit? The Taoist surnamed Jiang looked at Yong Fu in shock. Brother Yong, you are really generous. You are even willing to use such a treasure. Just this one fruit is worth half of the Celestial City, right? Yong Fu gently stroked his beard and smiled, treasures are meant to be used, otherwise they are worthless. That day, I did everything I could to find this item to deal with a strong enemy. Moreover, as long as I can protect the position of Celestial City's ruler, I might be able to find a better treasure after some time. The Taoist surnamed Jiang laughed out loud. Interesting, interesting. This time, as an unrelated person, I want to stay and see what kind of person is able to force Brother Yong to take out all of his assets. Mount Iron Soldier, Constellation Valley. Because the location of the battle between Zhang Yan and Yong Fu was set here, as the date of the battle grew closer and closer, the valley had become extraordinarily clamorous. Rainbows shot about in the sky while shadows flashed about, and a streak of light flashed by from time to time. It was the sect masters of the various sects on Divine House Mountain that were rushing over here. The head of the House of Benyi, Sun Tong, was full of smiles as he personally stood in the valley to welcome the guests. His third grandson, Xiucheng, was very displeased and said, "Father, you are also a head of a sect, why do you need to please these people?" Sun Tong scolded, "Shut up. My House of Benyi only has a dozen or so disciples. If we don't make friends with fellow Taoists, how can we establish ourselves in Mount Divine House?" Sun Xiucheng muttered, "What kind of logic is Taoist Yong fighting on the territory of my sect? If Taoist Yong wins, then it's fine, but if he loses, then that Taoist Zhang might take action against my Wu family." Sun Tong was furious, "Shut up. What do you know? Taoist Yong's arts are profound, and there are many treasures in the Celestial City. How can he lose? This is a rare opportunity for my House of Benyi. Don't talk nonsense. If the people of Mount may hear you, even I won't be able to protect you." Sun Xiucheng curled his lips and said, "Didn't father say that you are on good terms with Bai Jiaying? You can't even protect your son. I don't think this relationship is reliable. My House of Benyi should disband as soon as possible." To outsiders, Sun Tong and Bai Jiaying were on good terms, but in reality, that was not the case. He had just shamelessly tried to curry favor with Bai Jiaying, even thinking of giving his daughter to Bai Jiaying as a Dao companion. Even so, Bai Jiaying didn't pay much attention to him. Now that his son had poked at him, he couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. He scolded, "You unfilial son. Scram! Don't let me see you again. If you want to leave, then leave. Don't come looking for me to return." Sun Xiucheng wasn't afraid of his father at all. He stretched his body, and a beam of profound light soared up into the sky. When he was in midair, his eyeballs turned around a few times, and he looked at a tall mountain in the north. He activated his transcendence energy and flew over there. An hour later, he arrived at the mountain gate of the Deep Cave sect. He cupped his hands at the disciple guarding the gate and said, "Fellow Taoist, please go in and report to Uncle Master Chu that the disciples of the House of Benyi are here on the orders of the sect master." When the disciple heard this, he didn't dare to delay and immediately went in to report. In less than half an incense stick's time, Priest Chu flew out on a cloud of smoke. Sun Xiucheng smiled and said, "Uncle Master Chu, long time no see, your cultivation has become more refined." Priest Chu had seen Sun Xiucheng a few times, so he said politely, "So it's Nephew Sunday. What brings you here today?" Sun Xiucheng chuckled and cupped his hands. "Uncle Master Chu, may I be so bold to ask, ever since Spiritual Master Zhang became the house master of the Deep Cave sect, have any of the 37 sects come to visit Spiritual Master Zhang?" Priest Chu was startled. He frowned and said, "Why do you ask?" Sun Xiucheng's expression turned serious. He solemnly cupped his hands and said, "I came here today to say that the Benyi school is willing to accept the Deep Cave sect as the sect master." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.